the Winter Dragon, Lord of Game of Thrones. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1 Prologue. Flames, blood, screams. King's Landing, a city built by the Targaryen family. 300 years ago, Conqueror Aegon Targaryen used this place as a starting point to sweep across the Westeros continent, hence the name King's Landing. When the sun set and blood filled the world with red, no one could tell whether it was light or blood under their feet. In the King's Hall, a tall silver knight sat on the iron throne built by soldiers from all over the world with a sword. The Targaryen dynasty began with Aelys Targaryen and ended with Aelys Targaryen. Aerys Targaryen II, the king of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and the protector of the realm, was the old man lying in blood in front of the Silver Knight. Later, people would rather call him Mad King Aelys. At this time, a pregnant woman was crossing the Blackwater Bay with a boy. In the high tower of the Red Keep in the King's Landing Palace, a woman with a Dornish face was humming a lullaby with a sleeping baby in her arms. He had Dornish black hair and deep vast purple blue eyes. The door of the tower was violently pushed open, and a tall warrior walked in, holding a child in his arms. "Princess, I found the child for you," said Grandison. "Thank you for your hard work." The knight knelt on one knee and presented the child with both hands. "Your Highness, the people from Casterly Rock have already killed their way in. Please move." Elijah shook her head slightly, then put the child in her arms into the knight's hands, and then wrapped another swaddling cloth around him. "Without the king's order, I cannot leave King's Landing." Her voice was clear and gentle, but with a hint of weakness. Said Grandison, "Your uncle is a glorious king's good, and the Grandison family is also an honorable family, so should I believe you?" she asked the knight. The knight held the child in one hand and hammered his chest with the other hand. "The Grandison family swears to serve the king until death. Take this child away and bring him to Targaryen on the Wall. Tell him, after the long summer, the stars will weep blood and the cold darkness will cover the world. At this terrifying moment, the child of prophecy will pull out the burning sword Lightbringer. He is Aegon, born of the stars, the dragon prince of Targaryen, the prophesied savior of light, the future ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and the protector of the whole realm." "Yes, your highness." Only after the knight left did the woman force a smile and look at the child in her arms. The silver hairstyle and chubby face were so cute. She showed reluctance in her eyes and could only look away and look out the window of the tower. Her husband should be fighting against the rebels. "Rhaegar, I hope that this old man you often praise can really save our child," she murmured. Chapter 2 The Cook's Dream. Enough. The voice of Sir Aliza Thorne was like a Valyrian steel blade breaking through the air. He was scolding several fighting teenagers. As the coach on the wall, he would do this whenever a newcomer came. Cole didn't like his contemptuous tone. He felt that knights should abide by the humility and the creed, just like Bela the Spearbreaker, willing to fight for the weak. This was not a question a cook should think about, especially a cook on the wall. He was picked up from the King's Road by Maester Aemon on a winter night. Maester Aemon said that his face had been frozen white at that time, and he couldn't even cry. Everyone thought he would not survive that night, but who knew that his crying the next morning woke up the Night's Watch brothers in the entire tower. Commander-in-Chief Codgel even joked, "This boy has a loud voice, he is a ranger." Who knew that this sentence was like a curse? The winter did not take his life, but it took away his health. As long as he stood on the wall, he was afraid that he would be blown away by the wind. He was too thin and would never become a ranger. At this time, the cold wind blew, making him shiver constantly. He was obviously wrapped in a sheepskin coat, but no matter how many clothes he wore on the edge of the Great Wall, he could not stop the cold as a knife. Seeing that he was staring at the martial arts field in a daze again, the affairs officer Cledus could not help but shout at him, "Hey, little ranger, if you keep staring at it, Maester Aemon will be starving." Cole came back to his senses and looked at him apologetically. Cledus was short, bald, with a pair of dark red eyes, hunched shoulders, a round face with almost no chin, and a sheepskin coat full of patches. He was not thin. Maybe the position of affairs officer was more lucrative. Because he did not join the Night's Watch, Cole did not hold a position in Castle Black. His 15th name day was next year, when he could swear to the gods to join the Black Army. However, he had been following Maester Aemon for many years and could be considered a small official. Although he did not have the talent to become a ranger, Cole was a good cook. At least his roasted meat was praised by the commander-in-chief. The Black brothers were always surprised that he could find some strange things and make unusually delicious food. Cole himself was also confused, as if he knew these things by nature. He once asked Maester Aemon in doubt, but the only thing he got in return was a smile from the Maester, who shook his head. He told Cole that there were many strange people and things in this world, and even the books of the Citadel could not record them all. The Night's Watch knew that Cole's cooking was the most delicious. So far, the most anticipated thing for the Black brothers in a day was to drink the meat soup he cooked. If anyone was picked to be on duty at mealtime, he would definitely be depressed for the whole day, because he would probably only be able to eat a little rye bread and drink a bowl of cow urine like vegetable soup that day. Because there were hundreds of people, Cole was only responsible for the easiest tasks of making soup and cooking for Maester Aemon. He and Cledys walked up the stairs. Maester Aemon was taken care of by him, Cledys and Chet. Cledys was the Maester's assistant. Cole was responsible for the Maester's diet, and Chet was raising crows for the Night Watch. The Maester was already very old, and he always liked children. Cole was the one he brought up. In recent years, his health has been getting worse and worse, and he can't even see, but his words are always full of wisdom. The Black brothers are happy to listen to his guidance, just like the stories of the Targaryen family that Cole liked to listen to when he was a child. Pushing open the door, Maester Aemon's keen hearing quickly recognized Cole's footsteps. He asked in a soft voice, "Is it little Cole?" "It's me, Maester." Cole walked over and put the lunchbox under the bed. Maester Aemon reached out and rubbed Cole's hair. "You don't even want to call me Grandpa Aemon now. It seems that they have taught you well." Actually, a short dwarf came to him yesterday to ask for soup and revealed some words in the casual conversation. Cole felt very sympathetic to the dwarf. Perhaps it was because they both had physical defects that made them feel sorry for each other. They said it was the little devil, but Cole felt that Tyrion Lannister was a very knowledgeable person, although he was not as good as Maester Aemon. The little devil told him the 8 tenets of knights. Yes, Cole was a cook with a dream of knighthood, although he could not even be a ranger. But he longed to become an honorable knight, just like the Sword of the Morning and the fearless Ser Barristan. He should know honor and disgrace. Maester Aemon was a respected figure among the Night's Watch, and he should respectfully call him the Maester. In fact, when Cole called out the word Maester, a trace of disappointment flashed across Maester Aemon's old face, but he was relieved soon after thinking about it. "Lactus." Maester Aemon called softly, and then asked, "Have any letters been delivered today?" Lactus shook his head. "Chet didn't deliver any letters." Cole handed him a bowl of meat porridge. Maester Aemon no longer had teeth to chew. He took a spoon and drank it in small sips. He was not like the brothers of the Night's Watch. Whether eating or drinking soup, they would swallow it with open mouths. Maybe age is a certain reason, but Cole would rather believe that Maester Aemon is an honorable and cultured nobleman. Because nobles are linked to knights, Cole has an inexplicable liking for nobles. Sometimes after listening to the dirty jokes of a night watchman during the day, he would also dream at night that he was a knight somewhere and captured the heart of a beautiful noble lady. But the next morning, he had to wash his pants. After dinner, Cole walked with Maester Aemon again. The Maester would talk a lot, but Cole's soul had already flown to the martial arts field. He was always fascinated when he heard the sound of swords. Actually, Cole was also very tall, but he was too thin and too fragile. The little dwarf Lannister even joked that he should give him some of his height. Just then, a few new Night's Watchmen walked past them. They must have been scolded by the coach, Sir Thorne. It was said that one of them was a bastard of the Stark family, named Jon Snow. However, he was very arrogant, and Cole did not dare to talk to him for a while. Cole saw that Snow's face was a little gloomy, and he was obviously in a bad mood. The remaining 2 people walked with a limp, which showed that they were probably injured. That night, Cole, lying in the tower room, was still thinking about what Lannister had told him. Every time he heard a piece of information about the night, he would record it down and carve it on the wall of the tower defense. And at this moment, the new scratches that appeared on the wall were humility, honor, sacrifice, bravery, compassion, spirit, honesty, and justice. Tonight, the night sky of the entire Westeros continent was covered with dense clouds, and a meteor streaked across the sky, as if it had completely split the chaos, revealing the bright moonlight and bright stars. Even the most accomplished stargazer in the citadel could not see through the meaning of this meteor. Chapter 3 Coal. Its scales were as bright as ice crystals, and there was a blue flame burning inside. It had no ill intentions, and the sparks from its breath rose and fell, as if performing a magic trick for Cole. After the initial fear subsided, he couldn't help but touch its huge body. The scales looked cold, but there was a warmth like a hot spring. At this moment, the ground under his feet suddenly sank, and before he could hold it firmly, he fell into an abyss, falling and falling, until a huge bubble emerged from the void, and wrapped Cole in it. Then he saw a person's memory and a place he had never heard of before, the earth. Of course, when Cole woke up, his sweat had already soaked the entire bedsheet. He looked confusedly at the inner room of the tower, a small room with a wooden bed, grey walls, and a heavy door. This was originally the room of Commander-in-Chief Koja, but it was later given to Cole, because the new commander, Ser Mormont, moved to the King's Tower. Cole's name was given by Kojal. This kind of naming is very common in Westeros. Originally, Mr. Aemon wanted him to be called Aemon, and now this man has a new name, Aegon. After his memory was frozen for 14 years, it was finally unsealed. Aegon was a social animal who died suddenly in his previous life due to working 996. Of course, this is not to blame others. After all, he still has the habit of staying up late to read novels, stay up late to play games, stay up late to watch TV series, and he is simply standing on the blade of death singing and dancing rap crazily. He is Cole and Aegon, but in this world, he will live in this world of ice and fire as Cole. Yes, he is very familiar with this world. He has seen movies, TV shows and novels, and he has seen it more than once. Recalling the sporadic memories of 14 years carefully, it is not that he took over Cole's body. Little Cole died in that winter. He only merged his own memories, but because Aegon is an adult in his 20s after all, he will unconsciously bring in that identity. Night's dream. Cole can't laugh at his dream. Who doesn't have a night's dream in Westeros? The world of ice and fire is not a peaceful and harmonious paradise, but an arena for the aristocratic power game. The so-called flowing throne, the Seven Kingdoms. Ordinary people living on this continent don't care who sits on the Iron Throne. They only recognize their own lords. As the saying goes, the vassal of the vassal is not my vassal. The Westeros continent runs from south to north, east and west, and has been divided into 7 kingdoms since ancient times. This name has never changed for thousands of years, but now the 7 kingdoms are no longer independent kingdoms, but have become vassals of the Iron Throne. The wall stands in the north of the north, ruled by the Stark family, and it is this group of Stark family members who will stir up the continent. The arrogant Stark bastard outside will take the stage as the protagonist, and perform a myth of the bastard's counterattack. Cole tried to find his own figure in his memory, but he couldn't find his own trace, no matter how hard he looked. It seems that he is a passive BB character. I don't know if he can survive to the end. After all, the Night's Watch will have several battles to fight. As for the kings and generals, go to hell. He can't even swing a sword. What can he use to fight for the kings and generals? Next, he should think about saving his own dog life. The Night's Watch must not stay. After the Chief Ranger Benjen Stark lost his trace, the next thing is that the Commander-in-Chief Mormont will lead people out of the Great Wall. It's simply a meat bun hitting a dog. Fortunately, he didn't make the oath of the Night's Watch, so if he left, he would not be wanted by the kingdom. As for where to go, it remains to be considered. And if he follows the protagonist, he probably won't have so many lives. At this time, someone came to call him. After all, he had to start cooking for the brothers in the night. There were 600 mouths in the Black Castle, and he had to boil several pots of soup. Cole stood up, rolled up the quilt, and walked out directly. He had forgotten that he had taken off his coat yesterday and stood in the fierce cold wind. Virgie was a night watchman of the same age as Cole, but he was not tall, and the Clarks were not tall. He came last year, and the crime was to peek at a noble lady bathing. But he didn't say that himself, saying that he was imprisoned because he caught the noble lady and the groom having an affair. Because his father was the blacksmith in the castle, he was not executed. This kid was responsible for making soup with Cole, but the soup he made was nicknamed vegetable soup by the brothers in black. Cole, where is your coat? Why are you wearing it so thin? Virgie asked with some concern. The discipline in the Black Castle was strict, but there was a casino in the mole village outside the city wall, and some night watchmen who were eager to gamble would pawn their coats. Cole then noticed that his coat was not on, but why didn't he feel a bit of cold? He walked in and put on his sheepskin coat. The coat smelled very strong. No one on the wall would think of washing clothes. Everyone smelled the same. After putting on the clothes, the two went to the kitchen in the hall together. They were the first to arrive. The fire was not lit yet. The night watchmen who were changing shifts had just come down from the wall. Cole lit the fire with a flint, put the pot on it, and started to cut the meat. Just chop the meat into pieces and put it in. Whoever can get it is lucky. Sprinkle salt, put some wild vegetables, and put some wheat grains in it to make it taste better. Add some special seasonings, and it's done. Pour this pot of soup into the bucket, and repeat the process of boiling another pot until the bucket is full. He was going to move the bucket to the hall. Seeing this, Vicky was ready to come up to help, but he was soon dumbfounded. He saw Cole pick up the bucket with one hand, and strode towards the hall. After putting the bucket down, the night watchmen who were changing shifts rushed in. This was the first bucket of soup, with the most meat. They divided up all the soup, while munching on rye bread and drinking broth. Their faces full of satisfaction. After all, they had been in the cold wind for half the night. At this time, someone came in late from the door. It was Jon Snow. He looked at Cole and hesitated, but finally came over and asked, "Is there any more soup?" Cole was looking at him, and the two of them only had an intersection at this time. He helplessly said, "It's all gone. If you are willing to wait, you can wait for the next bucket." The next bucket was Vicky's vegetable soup. The two took turns. While Cole was distributing soup, Vicky was cooking in the kitchen, and so on. Jon Snow shook his head, then found a place to eat rye bread alone. He looked very lonely, and his stubborn look seemed out of place. With grey hair and a serious face, he looked like a little adult. "Cole, help me." Vicky, who was carrying the bucket out of the kitchen, was a little overwhelmed. Cole hurried over to help. "Vicky, your soup is not tasty. You can't even carry a bucket. You might as well go to Mole's Town and self-RGU." The Night Watch brothers shouted with laughter. Instantly, everyone burst into laughter, making Vicky's face flushed. This is already the simplest job for the Night Watch, but he still can't do it well. Cole taught him how to make seasonings, but he was so stupid that he either put too much of this or too little of that. Sometimes he even forgot to cook the meat. Cole helped him for a while, but he couldn't finish his own work. Chapter 4 Picking up the sword. "Actually, I'm a good blower. My dad once praised me." In the back kitchen, Virgie whispered to Cole. He nodded in approval. No one is useless. Hard-working people deserve respect. So Cole comforted him and said, "They are just joking. You don't have to care." Seeing that Cole didn't care, Virgie smiled honestly. He cared more about the opinion of Cole, his only friend. He was afraid that Cole would alienate him because of those words. "By the way, I found that your strength seems to have increased." Virgie thought of something and suddenly said. Cole was stunned for a moment. He clenched his palms. It seemed that it was indeed different from his memory. He had always subjectively brought it into the identity of his previous life. Some things were naturally ignored, just like the soup buckets that were moved many times today. In the past, he and Virgie had to rely on them. Batches of night watchmen came and went. They were always busy during the day, until at night, except for the brothers on duty. Everyone else would gather in the hall, chatting and bragging in groups of 2 or 3, playing dominoes. By noon, almost all the Night's Watch had already eaten their first meal. Cole and Vicky began to eat pork and wheat cakes with broth. If the brothers who went hunting brought back a big prey, they would have extra meals, but don't think about it today. Cole cooked Mr. Eamon's porridge and sent it to him. He didn't need to help with dinner because the Night's Watch brothers preferred to drink cider with their meal at night. Mr. Eamon would also come to the hall to eat with everyone in the evening, but he ate very little. He mostly listened to the stories shared by the Night's Watch. The nightlife of the Night's Watch was not all boring. When the candles in the hall were lit, some people would sing and some would share what they saw and heard. After all, this was a group of people from all over the world. The guys from the south would share their spring-like fields, the dense night culture and the beautiful noble ladies in an extremely exaggerated way. The boy from the west would naturally talk about the Lannister family. After all, it was rumored that the shit of the Duke of the West's guardian Tywin Lannister was all gold. However, the dwarf denied it, but he still joked, "A bucket of shit is gold." For a moment, the Night's Watch brothers laughed at the humorous little dwarf, but Tyrion Lannister just raised his glass and shrugged. After delivering food to Mr. Eamon, Cole came to the surroundings of the martial arts field as usual. Morning is training time. Many Night's Watch sweated in the open space, but in this cold weather, as long as there is a little water stain, it will quickly freeze. He saw Jon Snow, who was fighting with two children taller than him. The swords hit the armor and jingled. Although he was not tall, he made the two people scream. Their fight seemed extremely fierce, and it seemed that they were both ruthless. A child named Hood chopped Jon Snow's ribs with a sword. Cole saw the painful expression on his face, but he gritted his teeth and quickly turned back to that arrogant face. Hood and another child were in a worse situation. They were often wounded several times when they hit Jon Snow. If the blades had not been unsealed, they would have died countless times. Over there was a children's training ground, but the adults were in harmony. Everyone was fighting each other. Someone saw Cole and shouted to him to go down and try his hand. In the past, he would refuse because going down would only add to the jokes of these bastards. He walked down the spiral staircase, but today he wanted to try it. He knew very well how important martial arts were in this world. Dragon slaying skills can be used, but they cannot be absent. Oh, by the way, there are really dragons in this world. Oh, our little ranger is coming down. Someone said in a frivolous tone. This was not malicious among the Night's Watch, but rather a daily joke. "Give me the sword," Cole said to the trainee. Without thinking, he handed over the sword in his hand. Some people were already looking forward to the new program tonight. Maybe Bozo would dance like Cole swinging the sword. He weighed the sword in his hand and found it was very light. It felt like it was made of plastic, but it did feel like steel. Thinking of the feeling of powerlessness in his memory and looking at the light sword in his hand, his body had indeed undergone some incredible changes. "Hey, little ranger, why don't you go for the stake?" someone urged. Cole nodded, walked to the stake, held the hilt tightly with both hands, felt the friction from the fur on the hilt, and swung it hard. With a snap, the stake was split in two. The brothers in black all widened their eyes, even more surprised than seeing the woman. They couldn't help but wonder if the person in front of them was still the little steward who cooked delicious meals. Oh, the seven gods. Could this kid have been replaced by a White Walker? Cole himself was also amazed at the stake in front of him. He was so strong. The Night's Watcher who handed Cole the sword came up and grabbed his shoulder. "I didn't expect you to be so talented." A hint of embarrassment appeared on his face. In fact, he was a little surprised. "Maybe you can go over there and train with Coach Aliza and the others, but you have to return the sword to me first." He pointed at the children. "Thank you." Cole handed the sword back. He patted Cole on the chest. "Night's Watch, you're welcome. Remember to add a few more pieces of meat to my broth." Seeing Cole walk towards the corner where Jon Snow and the others were training, the Night's Watcher who borrowed the sword shrugged. "It seems the fun is over. You insidious boy, since you asked Cole to add meat to you. Come on, I want to challenge you." Who told you to react so slowly?" "I'm not afraid." You all come together. In an instant, the martial arts field was filled with curses, but the culprit Cole had quietly walked to the side of the recruits. Jon Snow also noticed the movement over there. He looked at Cole's tall and weak body and didn't expect that he could have such great strength. He thought to himself, no wonder they call him Little Ranger. Speaking of rangers, Snow thought of his uncle, Benjen Stark, who was the chief ranger of the Night's Watch. But there has been no news of him for a long time. Some people say that he is dead, which makes Snow very worried. Little Ranger, this is not a place for a cook. Sir Alistair was still so venomous. I want to train with them. Cole directly stated his purpose. It's up to the commander to decide. I remember that you don't even seem to be a member of the Night's Watch. But if you can beat our Lord Snow, maybe I will go to the commander in person to explain it. Alistair looked at Cole provocatively, as if to say, do you dare? Like Cole's nickname Little Ranger, Lord Snow is the title given to Jon Snow by Sir Alistair, which he hates. Cole picked up the sword. He also wanted to see the gap between himself and the trained people. He held the sword down and saluted to Jon Snow. Please give me your advice, Jon Snow. Oh, it seems that a Little Ranger is still a polite person, but your head has been cut off on the battlefield. Maybe you can exchange it for a glass of wine. Alistair Thorne said with a sneer. Chapter 5 Extraordinary Power. Jon Snow looked at the boy with the sword with hesitation, but he finally raised the sword. Sir Roderick, the instructor of Winterfell, said, if someone offers you a salute and challenges you to a fight, then refusing is a sign of cowardice. Although he knew that the man in front of him was not a knight and the salute was not appropriate, he did not want to show a trace of cowardice here. He wanted to tell everyone that he was a strong man who could serve as a ranger. Jon Snow gave him a formal knight's salute, and soon the recruits opened a small open space for them. Cole looked at Jon Snow quietly, hoping to learn something from him. He saw him moving slowly with his sword in hand, while keeping a close eye on Cole's every move. The two of them were in a stalemate for a while. When they were sure that Cole would not attack, Jon Snow took the lead in swinging his sword. He feinted a sword, hoping to test Cole's flaws. It was rumored that he had lived on the Great Wall since he was a child, so he should have a good martial arts. Jon Snow is proud. He thinks he is not inferior to any of his peers. At least, no one has ever defeated him except Robb. After arriving at the wall, he is more convinced of his pride. These sneaky people are not worthy of being his enemies. When Cole saw the sword stabbing at him, he naturally swung his sword to meet it. With the idea of great strength to make miracles happen, who knew that before the two swords touched, the sword changed its trajectory and hit Cole's ankle. He secretly said not good. The sword was already rushing to cut. Although the blade was not opened, it was very painful to hit the body. What's more, he was not even wearing armor. He was too careless. His eyes were fixed on the sword. Suddenly, things in his pupils began to slow down. The same was true for the sword. The blade was only half a foot away from the ribs under the armpit. It moved slowly in Cole's eyes. It seemed that time had slowed down by more than 10 times. Cole pulled his body away and found that his movements had also slowed down. In an instant, he thought of something. Maybe this is the so-called welfare of time travelers. Although it is good, it is not too against the sky in this world of monsters and demons. He moved his body away and dodged the sword. When he relaxed his tightly compressed pupils, the world came back to life, and his eyes were aching, as if he had been staring at the computer all day and his eyes were sore. The empty attack made Jon Snow frightened. Sure enough, Cole was different from these people. Although his tactics seemed to be full of loopholes, he could easily dodge his sword. After swinging the sword, a large vacuum was left in front of Jon Snow. If he took this opportunity to attack, he could catch him off guard. But how could a novice swordsman grasp such an opportunity? Cole just jumped away in shock and was frightened by Jon Snow's sword and sweated coldly. Jon Snow quickly drew back his sword to protect himself, but secretly cursed himself for being too careless. Since he knew that the enemy was not an ordinary person, he should have been more cautious. But the sword he imagined did not come, and he looked at the opposite side with some confusion. Cole was seen with a sword on his back, with a leisurely posture. He had felt this look on Sir Roderick before, which was a kind of calmness and confidence. It seems that his swordsmanship is far better than mine, Jon Snow thought to himself. So Jon Snow moved more cautiously. He remembered the footwork taught by the coach, swinging freely, but there was a certain pattern in the chaos. Even the veteran Sir Alistair, no matter how much he disliked this bastard of the Stark family, had to admit that he was a good fighter. On the other hand, Cole did not move at all, as if he was trying to deal with all kinds of changes with the same attitude. He was also annoyed by his own dullness, but he really didn't know how to fight. Was he going to beat the master to death with a turtle punch? It seemed that there was no other way except this. So this time it was Cole's turn to attack. He chopped fiercely, like a hurricane, bringing bursts of whistling. The trajectory of the sword was not difficult to predict, and anyone could even know where he was going to attack, but Jon Snow felt his scalp tingling, and anyone could see how powerful this sword was. He gritted his teeth, and used the sword to push it up, and his entire arm was numb in an instant, and even his wrist was slightly dislocated. What kind of monster is this? Jon Snow couldn't help but curse. Of course, Cole was not feeling well either. After all, the force is mutual. He twisted his face and took back the sword. It was really a way of killing 1,000 enemies and hurting 800 of his own. He handed the sword to his left hand and shook his aching right wrist. Seeing him holding the sword with his left hand, Jon Snow was already shocked. This is a balance monster. Damn it, I won't fight. That's right. Cole is left-handed in this life, and he was right-handed in his previous life, so he didn't have a reverse palm. He could shoot with both hands, even if he held two swords. It was impossible to make Jon Snow admit defeat. He had the stubborn blood of the North. Even if he died, he would not bow his head to you. He put down the dislocated hand. The careful Sir Alizer still saw that his hand was shaking, so he smiled disdainfully. He was just a little kid who didn't know how to release the force and his ridiculous arrogance. He learned to hold the sword with his left hand like Cole, but this hand could not be flexibly waved. Cole's sword was also weak, and the fight was like two children fighting. Jon Snow looked at him puzzled, only to see Cole smiled at him. He couldn't help but feel grateful. Didn't he want to take advantage of someone's misfortune? Maybe he should admit that Cole was a man with chivalry, at least better than Robb. If Robb got such an opportunity, he would definitely humiliate him. Of course, he had no ill intentions. It's not shameful to lose to such a person, Jon Snow thought. Unexpectedly, the other party spoke first. Sir Alizer, I don't think I'm Jon Snow's opponent. Maybe you should find someone else. As for the training, don't bother with me. That's right. Even if Jon Snow held the sword in his left hand, Cole was still overwhelmed. It turned out that he was far behind those who had truly undergone training. He turned around and saw Jon Snow with a grateful look on his face. He was a little confused, but still said, "You are a strong warrior, Jon Snow. You too, Cole." It seems that he is not as arrogant as the legend says. As expected, he is the protagonist and remains humble even when facing the weak. He took this opportunity to see his own strength clearly. In the future, he will try not to conflict with others. As for knights, screw him. After handing back the sword, he walked up the spiral staircase a little lonely. It would be a lie to say that he didn't want to be a superior person. No matter which world you are in, you can't avoid the pursuit of fame and fortune. Isn't the so-called game of power just a fight for these vulgar things? This is a chaotic world, and human life is worthless. But it is also an opportunity. There are countless people who can take advantage of it to rise to the top. Hey, not bad little cook. A short man with a wine bag turned out from behind a wooden stake. Lannister? Chapter 6 Invitation. He has a disproportionately large head. One eye is larger than the other, and his facial features look a bit compact. He has the golden hair color of the Lannister family. He is wearing a black bear fur coat. What doesn't match the bear coat is the deep red leather coat inside, with golden lion buttons and colorful carvings. He looks a bit like a monkey in a crown. Tyrion Lannister, known as the Little Devil, does not have the demeanor of a nobleman. At least he can talk to a group of horse thieves and rapists. Cole looked at this guy carefully. If there is anyone he admires in this world, this little dwarf is one of them. He inherited the wisdom of the cunning Lannister family, but unfortunately the head of the family, Duke Tywin, chose to turn a blind eye. In such a dangerous world, only smart people often live longer. What? Do you want to compete with me? Then you really chose the right person. Seeing Cole staring at him, Tyrion said teasingly, "I dare not touch the Lannisters. I heard that their language is a debt must be paid." Tyrion shrugged, "If I die in a duel, Casterly Rock may hold a banquet, and my father will ask the king to knight you, because you gave his most disliked son an honorable death." His tone was full of sarcasm. Sure enough, the father and son had a deep grudge. "Would you like a sip?" Tyrion handed over his wine bag. This guy never left his wine, but he was never stingy in sharing his wine. Cole was naturally not polite. This was the wine Summer had brought from the south. In the wall, where only sea idea and beer can be drunk, Summer is simply a treasure. He took a sip, which was somewhat mellow and sweet. This taste can only be brewed in the warm south and dawn. The wine tasted more like a juice, and the alcohol content was not high. No wonder Tyrion liked it so much. "When are you leaving?" Cole asked, squatting beside the ladder. "Maybe I'll stay for a few more days. Old Mormont said you want to be a knight." He patted Cole's chest, only to feel that he hit the bronze armor, which was very stiff. "But I think you are more suitable to be a cook. I heard that you are not a night watchman. Maybe you can follow me to the south. Whether you are a knight or a cook, it is better than this place, where you can't even pee," Tyrion suggested. Although Cole's cooking skills are really good, Tyrion, who is used to eating delicacies from mountains and seas, is not surprised. He invited Cole to go south, just to agree to the request of an old man. Go south. Cole did think about it. It was too dangerous on the wall. Others did not believe in the White Walkers, but he believed in it to the bone. Everyone knew that the White Walkers were coming to attack the city, and they would come on a dragon. Only a fool would want to stay here, but there were some things here that he could not give up. Cole was 14 this year, and Aemon was more than 100 years old. The day of avenging Aemon was short. He is his only relative in this world. Although Cole is afraid of death, he is not an ungrateful person. Even if he cannot repay the Maester's kindness, Cole will take care of him in the last period of his life. The word filial piety flows in the blood and spirit of every Chinese son and daughter. "Maybe I will go to the south, if I have a chance, but forget it now." Seeing Cole's refusal, Tyrion did not say anything more. He knew how to read people's expressions. Cole refused decisively. It would be useless to say more, but it would easily lead to resentment. "So you don't plan to join the Night's Watch?" he asked. Cole shook his head. "This place doesn't belong to me. I think you are doing well here. Look at the illegitimate son of the Stark family. Oh, this kid is really as stubborn as his father. Honorable and brave. He is actually a very good warrior. I believe that the Night's Watch with the same honor will accept him." Cole turned his eyes to the martial arts field. "You think highly of him. Do you want me to tell him there is a cook who likes you very much? Maybe you won't be lonely in the future at the wall." Ha ha ha. He laughed, as if he was very proud of his joke. What a hateful little devil. But his pupils widened instantly and he shouted, "Damn it, leave me a sip." He grabbed the wine bag and protected it in his arms, as if it was some kind of treasure. Well, it was indeed a treasure. In fact, there was still a lot of wine, but Cole deliberately blocked the mouth to scare him, and then raised his head to drink. "You joked like this to Jon Snow. Aren't you afraid that his wolf will bite your head off?" Speaking of wolves, Tyrion couldn't help shrinking his neck. He was indeed a little afraid of the white dire wolf. He was almost bitten to death on the way to the wall. "I believe the bastard will take good care of his white wolf. In fact, compared with Jon Snow's dire wolf, I'm more curious about how you did it. What did you do?" Cole was a little puzzled. "It's like this today. When I first saw you, you looked a little frail. I just felt like you were a different person. You don't have a twin brother, do you?" "You think too much, Lannister." The two chatted for a while, and Cole looked at the direction of the sun. It was time to cook for the Maester. He always ate with the Night's Watch in the hall at night. Tyrion followed him to the kitchen, and then secretly ate the food Cole made, while talking about all sorts of things. When Cole moved the porridge to the hall, it was already crowded, with a lot of people toasting their cups. Mormont sat on the high seat, next to Maester Aemon and Chief Steward Bowen Marsh, followed by Ser Aliza and several other famous Night's Watch. Cole took Maester Aemon's porridge up, and then sat in his seat. Of course, Tyrion had to sit in the main seat. After all, as the Queen's younger brother, his status in Westeros was still very prominent and worthy of the attention of the Night's Watch. Snow was still sitting alone in the corner. He always did this these days. No one came up to talk to him. He seemed to be isolated, but this did not affect Cole. He walked straight over with his food. "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" Cole asked him. Snow, who had been eating silently with his head down, raised his head and saw that it was Cole who had competed with him during the day. He was stunned for a moment, then nodded. This is my roasted rabbit meat. Do you want to try it? It was exchanged by Virgie for something. He gave me some. Cole pushed the rabbit meat on the plate. Snow hesitated for a while, then took a piece, and then saw Cole laughing. How could a 14-year-old child have so many schemes? In fact, he also wanted to integrate into his peers, but the education he received since childhood made him out of place here. Actually, you won during the day, Snow suddenly said. Chapter 7 Expulsion. The rabbit meat was sprinkled with onions, which tasted mellow and crispy. Jon Snow couldn't stop eating after taking a bite. The Night's Watch brothers were not so particular about food. They would just eat the roasted meat with the original flavor of onions. In this place where no one lives, it was good to have something to eat. The rabbit meat was roasted to be crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, and the onion juice was mixed with honey. It was simply amazing. The honey was obtained from Tyrion. There was also a cook among his servants. Honey was usually used to make water for Tyrion to drink. In order to get the honey, Cole gave him half of the rabbit. What a greedy Lannister. The food seemed to bring Jon Snow closer to him. After all, he was only a child of about 14 years old. Although he was greedy at the age, he still couldn't resist the temptation of taste. He complained, I thought the Night's Watch were like Uncle Benjen, and of course you are too. Are you a little disappointed? Jon Snow nodded. This place was terrible. They were all exiles from the kingdom. This was a place where filth and dirt were hidden. It's not as bad as you think, Cole said. What you see is just their status in the kingdom, but here they have said goodbye to everything in the past, their wives, parents, and children. Maybe they are not honorable people, not knights, do not know how to be humble, or even not good people, but they are the Night's Watch. When the long night comes, they will be the strongest line of defense for mankind. It's not wrong to choose the Night's Watch, Jon Snow. The Night's Watch, which can tolerate criminals and nobles, is like the Great Wall, full of glory. If the White Walkers come, the human race will watch over each other. Jon Snow listened silently, and suddenly another voice interrupted. You are too alarmist, little cook. It was Tyrion who was standing by the table. He was only a little taller than the table, with only his head sticking out. Those old guys are so boring. He pushed Cole and made room for him very tactfully, and he jumped up. The old Nana's story can only scare a 7-year-old child. He said jokingly, you yourself don't plan to join, but you still want to trick people into staying in this icy and snowy place. The White Walker should be the story that the old nanny in every castle likes to use to scare children. Jon Snow was stunned for a moment and turned his eyes to Cole, as if asking, is this true? It's not easy to meet a more interesting person in the Night's Watch, but it turns out that he is not in the same group. This is like meeting a person holding a fishing rod on the way to fishing and trying to get close to him, but it turns out that he is catching dragonflies. There was some resentment in his eyes for a while. I haven't been outside the Great Wall. Who knows if there are no White Walkers there? Maybe it's not just White Walkers. Many weird people may be hiding outside the Great Wall. He knew that these people would not believe this set of rhetoric before the evidence was laid out. Talking to them about the White Walkers now is like talking about Ultraman. Maybe believing in the light will not make you a lunatic, but people who believe in the White Walkers will definitely be regarded as fools in Westeros. It seems that he successfully changed the subject. Tyrion then began to talk about the White Walkers with classics. He read a lot of books, at least he had read almost all the books in the palace library in Casterly Rock. The story was very interesting and vivid in his mouth, and some historical secrets were casually told. Sometimes you have to admire the knowledge contained in this small body. Listening to the story, Jon Snow's tiredness and melancholy instantly dissipated. After coming to the wall for so long, Jon Snow had never been so happy. They were like a few friends bragging and farting with each other by the fire after dinner. He liked this atmosphere, which made him feel like he was back in Winterfell with Robb and the others. At that time, his adopted son Greyjoy would also share stories with them like this. Although he didn't like the guy named Theon Greyjoy, he had to admit that his stories were as interesting as Lannister's. The three laughed and played until the night. After the sky gradually darkened, the night watchmen began to return to the tower in twos and threes to rest. The commander-in-chief, who had been sitting in the main seat, walked towards them. He should go back to rest. Hey, guys. What are you talking about? Cole and Jon Snow both stood up. This man was the top commander of the wall. A smile appeared on the old bear's hard face, and he waved his hand to signal them to sit down. Tyrion was crossing his legs, so he didn't need to salute. The old bear sat down next to Jon Snow. He looked at Cole. In a sense, Cole was also grown up under his watch. When he was a child, the naughty Cole didn't know what was superior and inferior, and even pulled his beard. At that time, he was not even the commander-in-chief. About your leaving, I allow you. Although the Night's Watch is not rich, the armor and sword will be prepared for you. Go and pursue your dream of knighthood. I hope that in the legends of future generations, there will be a little guy named Cole who will leave his name. Cole was stunned for a moment. He didn't remember telling the commander-in-chief that he wanted to leave, although he had this idea in his heart. The Night's Watch is a place that outsiders avoid, but for Cole it is his home where he has lived for 14 years, and many people here treat him very well. Looking at this old man who was betrayed and killed by his subordinates after leaving the wall, he suddenly felt guilty. It was these people who took care of him until now. He was like a child of the Night's Watch, but he couldn't do anything for the Night's Watch. Mormont stretched out his hand to stop him. I'm now officially expelling you as the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Cole. There will be no place for you in the Night's Watch. He turned his head away, and Mr. Riemann seemed to have noticed something and looked over. The loose muscles on his face forced a smile. Mormont also looked over. He thought to himself, let Aemon do the good things, and let Mormont do the bad things. In the past, Commander Koja spanked his buttocks when he was disobedient, but later this power was passed to Mormont. Finally, Cole looked at Tyrion. The little devil raised his head and shrugged. It's none of my business, but you can come with me when the time comes. The commander-in-chief looked determined, as if he was expelling a criminal, but everyone knew his intention. Some of the Night's Watchmen who were still sitting in the hall looked at him with envy. This was the first time someone had left the Night's Watch. Of course, Cole had never taken an oath, so he was not a real Night's Watchman. Once a Night's Watchman takes an oath, he must fulfill his responsibilities until death. Jon Snow was able to leave later because he had already sacrificed his life once. But this kid finally came back on his own. Some people began to applaud. He has always been very popular here. When he was a child, he was a little kid teased by the black shirts. Now he has grown up and is also popular because of his good cooking. Someone pretended to be sad and sighed, alas, I will go there to drink delicious broth in the future. In an instant, the applause in the whole hall rose and fell, as if they were seeing off a warrior who was about to travel far away. Only Virgie was a little sad. His only friend was Cole, but he was leaving and might not come back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Winter Night. The two swords were flying like a hurricane, and the swords and spears were clanging in the martial arts arena. In just a few days, he showed a strong talent. Some people are born to fight, especially Cole. The swords and shadows, the big swords in his left and right hands fell like a torrential rain. Lannister seemed to want to take a good look at the Great Wall, so he followed Jon Snow and others to train in the martial arts arena these days, making some preparations for the upcoming journey. Even in peacetime, there are countless chicken stealing and dog stealing people on the Kingdom Avenue. The ability to protect oneself naturally needs more, the better. He has no servants to protect himself, so he can only use his own skills. The sweat of these days has not been in vain. Relying on the eye of time and their huge force, he is invincible in the martial arts arena, and even Jon Snow dare not take over from him easily. No matter how many skills he has, they will pale in the face of absolute power. If he is equipped with heavy armor, he is simply a human tank, and he will die if he is touched by swords. He still looks tall and thin, but his muscle mass has slowly accumulated. This unreasonable power coupled with his seemingly agile dodge, made everyone who fought with him secretly worried. It was fine if they couldn't take his attack, but they couldn't hit him either. Isn't this bullying an honest person? The way of the truth is simple. He had no skills at all in fighting, and often hurt his wrist when holding the sword. But even the proud Sir Aliza had to admit that this kid was already a good warrior in the Seven Kingdoms, but he lacked skills and experience. After all, even he suffered a loss at the hands of this kid. Pulling out the training helmet buckled on his head, sweat had already soaked his hair, which showed that the giant force and the eye of time and space consumed a lot of him. The main thing was the mental consumption of the eye of time and space. The limit was 10 minutes. If the battle was not resolved in 10 minutes, then he had to stop using it, otherwise his eyes would be torn apart, and then the sky and the earth would be dark, and he would not be able to see anything. Each time he used it, he had to close his eyes and meditate for at least half an hour. Damn, you're really strong, Cole. Gren rubbed his shoulders. His whole arm was about to fly off after being hit by a sword. Originally, he was considered a small leader of the new recruits, but he quickly accepted Cole's orders. Unlike a certain bastard who looked high and mighty, everything on the wall depends on your own ability. Although fists can be intimidating, fists alone will not make people truly believe in you. Cole intended to pull Jon Snow into the group of new recruits, but unfortunately our Lord Jon Snow still seemed to look down on these guys. After the training, Jon Snow walked with him. "When are you leaving?" Jon Snow asked. "Let's wait for Lannister. When he has peed enough on the wall, we will leave." Tyrion has been joking that he wants to stand at the end of the world and pee under the wall, but thinking of the fierce wind above, it is estimated that the short body will be blown to the East China Sea. "Where are you going?" "King's Landing, Casterly Rock." When asked this, he couldn't answer for a while. Where to go? He thought about it for a long time. Thinking of the coming storm, should he find a safe place to hide, or dive into the vortex to seek wealth and honor? If before, he might choose to find a safe place, but now, although the battlefield is blind, it is naturally accompanied by unlimited opportunities at the same time. He is also extremely conflicted in his heart. The noble class and the knight class are like a gold coin hanging in the air, but it is also a sharp sword. If you want to take the gold coin, you have to be careful to get cut. Maybe I will go to Winterfell first. Maybe I will ask you to introduce your brother to me. Speaking of Winterfell, Jon Snow's eyes suddenly burst into a gleam of light. His heart still belongs to that place, his dream home. Robb will not canonize you as a knight, but if there is a letter from me, Robb will definitely let you stay, he said very confidently. Haha, that depends on Lord Snow saying something nice to me. He put the sword and armor on the shelf. He didn't have much hope for the armor promised by the commander-in-chief. After all, he knew very well how poor the Night's Watch was. Armor was in short supply and the quality was very mixed. He had not been busy in the kitchen these days. He used all his limited energy to hone his martial arts. Of course, he was not in the ranks of the Night's Watch. Sir Aliza would not care about him, but occasionally mocked him. Snow was a good teacher. At least he taught Cole many fighting skills. "Hey, Cole, do you want to go to the hall with us?" After the morning exercise, it was time for dinner. Gren and his gang also came over to put things down and invited Cole. Cole naturally knew that they were isolating Jon Snow. Women and children like to use this method very much. Cold violence can sometimes make people feel accomplished. Of course, it's not their fault. Jon Snow did do something extreme. Leaving a few tricks in training is a matter of human relations. After all, they are brothers who will live together in the future. But the coach of Winterfell would not teach people in that way. Sir Roderick would only tell the group of stark wolves loudly, "Training is just like fighting. Any slackness will make you lose your life on the battlefield. Holding back in front of a knight is an insult. You go first, Jon Snow, and I will be here in a while." Cole finally chose to stand on Jon Snow's side. If you look carefully, you can find that Jon Snow had clenched his fists for a long time, and only slowly opened them after hearing Cole's words. In the past few days of training, they have been saying bad things about Cole in his ears. Although he is angry, he has no other choice except to use more strength in the fight. In Jon Snow's view, this kind of provocation is the way of eunuchs and women, which is not fair at all. After the refusal, Gren and the others were not angry because they all knew that Cole would not stay here for long. He glanced at Jon Snow provocatively, spit out the word bastard with his mouth, and then left with 4 followers. Cole felt helpless about the conflicts among these kids. Considering his age, these were not big grudges, but just small fights between children. Jon Snow, you can actually try to fit in with them. Actually, Gren is not as bad as you think. He just looks ugly. Looking at Jon Snow's stubborn look, Cole still decisively chose to shut up. But someone spoke up. If you don't want to have your throat cut at night, you'd better listen to him. The two turned around and saw a man with a big belly and a rough beard covering his entire face. Master Donald. Cole greeted. The blacksmith smiled at Cole, then looked at Jon Snow with a stern face. He asked, if killing a horse thief can make you feel honorable, then do it, but you have to be careful of assassinations from other horse thieves. Maybe one night, your head will be hung on the Great Wall for the wild people to admire. He scolded Jon Snow harshly with sharp words. When the two left, Jon Snow's face was like an eggplant hit by frost. Cole was relaxed. After all, he was watching the show the whole time. You don't help me either, Snow complained. Snow saw his gloating expression just now. Cole shrugged. I want to help you, but Master Donald seems to be right. I don't have any reason. Cole figure waved at him from the corner. It was Virgie. I haven't seen him much in the past few days, and I don't know where he went. My good brother Virgie, maybe I can introduce him to you. Cole pointed at the short and fat boy and said to Snow. Snow shook his head. He was in a complicated mood now. He just wanted to be alone. Of course, it would be nice to find someone to tell his sorrows to. Unfortunately, it seemed that Cole was in trouble. I have to go back to the tower, he said evasively. Okay, see you later. After Cole said goodbye, he walked towards Virgie. What was this kid doing sneakily? He was carrying something wrapped in a cloth strip on his back. Cole looked at him in confusion and asked, what's wrong? Where have you been these days? I thought the White Walkers had taken you away. He chuckled and handed over the cloth bag. You're leaving. I have to prepare some gifts for you. He stared at the cloth strip in a daze. He didn't expect that Viggy had been running around for him these days. This stupid boy couldn't do anything and was often so clumsy that Cole couldn't help laughing and crying. This is what my father gave me when I came to the wall. Anyway, I don't know how to use a sword, so I buried it under the wall. Take it out and have a look. Holding the sword in his hand and looking at the cold beak, he knew the importance of this gift. This was something that Viggy's father left for him to save his life. Cole's pupils were slightly red. Men don't shed tears easily, but after so many years, he didn't know when he would see her again. He looked at this dark face that was not very outstanding and that honest smile. Then wait for this sword to become famous in the 7 kingdoms, he said with a chuckle. Does it have a name? Sometimes, the friendship between men does not even require the word of thanks. Virgil shook his head. A wandering knight gave the axe to my father, and then he remelted it. It has not been named yet. Cole touched the thin blade, and the sharp cold light was as sharp as a dragon's tooth. It was very similar to the Valyrian steel sword that Lord Commander Mormont carried with him. Then call it winter night. Chapter 9, The Horse's Hoof. Cole, my brother is awake. Bran is alive. He rushed down from the king's tower. Cole was walking towards the hall with his sword on his back and saw Jon Snow, who was excited and full of questions. He handed over a letter. Look, the gods brought him back to life. This should be the only good news Jon Snow has heard in these days. This is really good news. The two walked into the hall together. Tyrion was sitting at the table eating. Jon Snow ran to him as fast as the wind. He is alive. Bless him, he is alive. Tyrion also greeted Cole, and he turned to look at Cole, as if asking this kid what was going crazy. Jon Snow stuffed the letter into the hands of the little devil. Here, read it. Some people gathered and looked at them curiously. Grelin was also among them, but he didn't dare to get too close. He stood alone, anxious and uneasy. His nickname was Lazy Toad, but at this time he looked very dull. The injury was caused by Jon Snow. When he thought of what Master Donald said, and the good news brought by Bran, the depression and stagnation in his heart gradually dissipated. He reflected and thought, maybe I did go too far. Cole is obviously very strong, but he never kills him. Thinking of this, Jon Snow walked over and said, "I'm sorry for hurting your wrist like this. If you want, I can teach you how to counter this move someday." Grant looked at Jon Snow blankly. He would never have thought that this arrogant noble bastard would apologize to him. There was no big hatred. He scratched his head with his uninjured hand and smiled. "I'm too stupid, but this move is really painful." Hearing Jon Snow's shameless desire to teach others martial arts, Sir Aliza mocked him unceremoniously. However, Jon Snow, who was in a good mood, did not care about him. Instead, he responded to him with a joke, but there was no trace of gloom hidden in Aliza's eyes. Everyone laughed at the joke, only Sir Aliza looked bitter and resentful. Cole thought that this man seemed a little narrow-minded, and he would probably make things difficult for Jon Snow in the future. As Cole expected, Aliza kept trying to make trouble for Jon Snow in the next few days. He arranged 2 or 3 people to fight him during morning exercises and asked him to keep watch at night. Sometimes Cole would accompany him to patrol the wall out of friendship. Cole felt that the time to leave was approaching, so in addition to training, he spent all his time making food bags. Tyrion found him that day, and they had to set out south tomorrow. Cole found Viggy with a large bag of materials. He was squatting by the fire pit fiddling with something. "Viggy," he called softly, then put down the bag. "This is the material package I made for you these days. When you make soup next time, put some in it. Don't forget to put the meat in, otherwise they will say it's vegetable soup again." Viggy stood up, took the material package, and asked sadly, "Are you ready to leave?" "Leaving tomorrow." He looked a little depressed. "I really hope to go with you, even if it's just to be your squire." Cole shook his head and smiled. "I'm not even a knight. Why do I need a squire? Maybe I have to be a squire for the night." "You are so smart. You will definitely become a knight," Viggy said confidently. "I hope so. By the way, you have to remember what I said. Don't be stubborn, and run as soon as you encounter danger." "Well, I remember. But will the White Walkers really come? Why don't you tell the commander and the maester?" "What's the use, even if they believe it? Do you think Old Bear doesn't know? He must have heard the report about the White Walkers. It's useless. There are not enough people on the wall now, and even fewer who can fight. When the White Walkers come, we can only rely on this wall." After saying goodbye to Viggy, Cole asked to see Maester Aemon again. He was sitting in the tower. He heard the footsteps and revealed Cole's identity in one sentence. "Little Cole, you are here." "Grandpa Aemon." Cole squatted beside him. Aemon stretched out his dry hands and gently touched his face. "Grown up. Little Cole has finally grown up. Grandpa Aemon, I will leave with Tyrion Lannister and others tomorrow. Young dragons will always have a time to soar into the blue sky, so there is no need to linger on the old place." He took out a letter from his arms. "If you are tired of disputes, go to Old Town. It is a gift I left for you. This is a letter of introduction, but it is not sealed with the emblem of the Night's Watch. Grandpa Aemon, this. Go, child. Don't forget to read. Armor can arm the body, but books can arm the mind." Cole put the envelope against his chest and knelt down to him. Although he knew that he could not see it, this ceremony was indeed his sincere gratitude. At night, a brother of the Night's Watch brought the equipment promised by the Old Bear, a set of grey leather armor, an iron sword, wrist guards, gloves, and leggings. The next morning, there was a commotion. The 3 brothers of the Night's Watch, Tyrion and his 2 servants, although they were lightly equipped, had to be well prepared. After leaving Mole Village, they had to walk in the uninhabited area for several days, and only when they approached the Wolf Forest would there be traces of human beings. Seeing Cole coming down from the tower, Tyrion said jokingly, "You look good, young man. The ladies in the south really like your slender waist." "Tyrion, you got up really early. It's hard to get a good night's sleep in this damn place. Even if there's a stove, I'm afraid the stick will freeze." Cole curled his lips. "Your joke is really a bad interest. That's because you, a little brat, don't understand. When you kiss that white and tender rabbit, you won't think it's a bad interest. When you get to Winterfell, I can ask you to try those passionate northern girls. Well, this little dwarf is still a complete prostitute, and he doesn't shy away from these topics at all. He even talks more dirty than those wandering knights. As long as you talk to him about girls, he can tell you the characteristics of girls from Dawn to the north, from the Rhoynar to the First Men. You have to know that in this era, when kings like to visit prostitutes, brothels are legal. It's really the evil Middle Ages. Jon Snow and Vhagar also came over. Cole used Tyrion's wine to bribe the blacksmith master Donald. In the future, in addition to cooking, Vhagar only had to help him. Vhagar had some experience in blacksmithing and hoped that this would make it easier for him. The bag was quickly prepared, and Jon Snow stuffed a letter into Cole's hand. It was written to Robb Stark. He originally wanted to bring a message, but after thinking about it, he borrowed a pen and ink to write a letter in order to increase the credibility. He whispered to Cole, "Robb will definitely let you stay. Please help me to see Bran." Cole put the letter into the bag. He only brought a small bag. Even though he had lived on the wall for 14 years, he didn't have too many precious things, and his room was left to Jon Snow. This kid actually ran to live in that cold abandoned building. I really don't know how he survived. Don't worry, I will take your concern back to Winterfell. The figures of the 7 horses gradually disappeared outside the tower. Only a few black dots could be seen faintly on the castle black. Maester Aemon and Lord Commander Mormont stood together and looked into the distance. The child has changed a lot. I had hoped that he could stay. He should go and see the southern world. We are all old, but he is still young, isn't he? The old bear sighed. The situation of the Night's Watch was not good now. The child was indeed delayed here. Maybe you are right. This is no longer the glorious place it once was. There is nothing left here except for the depressed young people and the exhausted old men. The long night is coming. Chapter 10, Wolf Forest. Jon asked me to help his crippled little brother, but I'm just a crippled dwarf, and even the Maester can't make him stand up. Tyrion complained to Cole when they were setting up camp. Maybe Jon Snow just wants you to enlighten the child with knowledge. Helplessness flashed in Tyrion's eyes. Not every Stark family member is as easy to get along with as Jon Snow. Tyrion knows how big their prejudice against the Lannister family is. Lions and wolves seem to be born enemies in the forest. Just look at Benjen Stark's sarcasm towards him when he went north. This bearskin coat was sent by Benjen to disgust him. It was rotten and smelly, but he didn't suffer any loss. He put it on decisively, making Stark's plan all fall through. If he hadn't promised Jon Snow, Tyrion wouldn't even want to get close to Winterfell Castle. He would rather spend a night in the winter town outside the city and find a northern girl to have fun. "Hey, look what I brought." Yoren in black grinned with his black teeth and held a snow rabbit in his hand. He had just gone hunting with 2 other black brothers. They were responsible for escorting Tyrion to Winterfell, and then Yoren would follow him south to King's Landing to see if there was any fresh blood in the King's prison to replenish the Night's Watch. Yoren was an expatriate of the Night's Watch. His position was an officer of affairs. He was responsible for traveling between the castles of the 7 kingdoms to search for criminals and send them to the Wall. Commander-in-Chief Mormont seemed to have vaguely sensed the strange phenomenon outside the Wall and felt that the Night's Watch was short of personnel, so he once again sent Yoren to King's Landing, hoping to bring back more people. The Commander-in-Chief warmly entertained Tyrion in the hope that he could say good things to the Queen and Lord Tywin and explain the situation of the Night's Watch to these bigwigs. "Little Cole, I leave it to you. I haven't eaten your roasted meat for a long time." Yoren stuffed the snow rabbit in his hand without hesitation. Cole and Tyrion's 2 servants were responsible for repairing the camp, making fire and cooking. Use a knife to peel the rabbit's skin, cut a line in the middle, and pull out the internal organs and intestines. Cut to short branches to prop up the rabbit. Scrape a few more cuts in the meaty parts, and roast the rabbit on the fire rack. Use a branch to pierce 2 onions and roast them over the fire. When the rabbit meat is half cooked, Cole takes out the herbs he prepared along the way, smears them on the top, squeezes a few onions and sprinkles the juice on top, and puts chopped garlic. The aroma rises in an instant, and Tyrion, who is drinking wine and reading a book, moves his nose, gets up from the ground and leans over here. "Cut me a piece." He has been impatient. Cole cuts a piece of crispy leg meat and hands it to him. He swallows it in one gulp, and his face turns red in an instant. He quickly jumps back to get his wine bag, and the wine flows into his stomach like a spring, and he drinks half of the bag of wine directly, and he exhales slowly. Damn, I can still get burned in this damn weather. He cursed angrily. Who told you to be so greedy? Cole laughed at one side. The other Night's Watch brothers were also attracted by the smell. One rabbit was definitely not enough to share. There were 7 people here. With rye bread, each person could only get a palm-sized piece of meat. Tyrion got more, because of his special status. It's a loss that the old bear let you go. Euron stuffed the rabbit meat into his mouth, not forgetting to say angrily, if our King Robert knew that someone could roast meat so deliciously, he would probably send the King's Guard to capture you. Another Night's Watch responded with praise. These words seemed to hit the nail on the head for Tyrion. He swallowed the rabbit meat in his mouth and said, I have had the honor of eating the dishes cooked by the king's chef. To be honest, this meat is not worse than this. He turned his head and looked at Cole. Are you sure you don't want to be a cook? I can ask my father to recruit you to Casterly Rock. Tyrion, even if you move out of Lord Tywin, I will not be your cook. If you want to eat what I cook, then come and be my squire. Cole joked. Tyrion rolled his eyes. You are not even a knight. If you beg me, I might let my brother crown you. Brother? Kingslayer? Tyrion shook his head. He doesn't like this nickname. No one likes nicknames, just like others like to call me Raven, which is not a lucky thing. Euron said. The Night's Watch brother thought of something and said, Black wings bring black news. Not necessarily, at least the crows brought good news to Jon. Tyrion took another bite of rabbit meat. He was the only one who hadn't finished eating. At night, Tyrion and Cole squeezed into a tent. This little devil liked to talk in his sleep at night, and the color was very dark. Cole could only squeeze his body as far away as possible. The next day, Cole woke up with bloodshot eyes. Tyrion was still complaining, when we get to Winterfell, we have to get a feather bed first, and then find a prostitute. After saying that, he took out the wine bag, and gulped down a sip. Cole suspected that he had to rely on this wine to survive. After packing up the bag, the horse continued to head south. The appearance of the ancient forest could be vaguely seen. This place was called Wolf Forest in the north. At night, you could always hear the howling of wolves. After passing the Wolfwood, it was not far from Winterfell. The narrow mountain road and the King's Road were hard to find in this forest. Fortunately, with Euron, the old horse of the Night's Watch, they would not get lost. They walked slowly on the road. This forest was, just as its name indicated, and the shadows were always full of dangers. Tyrion rode side by side with Cole. Since knowing that Cole had read all the books of the Night's Watch, the two of them had endless topics to talk about. He shared with Cole the stories of the South, and Cole shared with him the history of the Great Wall. The Great Wall, built of ice and stone, has a history of nearly 8,000 years. All the stories that happened here are recorded in the library of the Maester. Listening to the stories of the White Walkers and the Wildlings, Tyrion could not help but marvel frequently. Your stories are much more exciting than those told by the nanny. Before he could finish, a black shadow came from the shadow like a black lightning, and hit Tyrion directly. Cole was startled, and the Night's Watch and the servants also stopped their horses in a hurry. Tyrion had already fallen off his horse. It was a grey wolf, half the height of a horse. Euron exclaimed, "It's a direwolf." Everyone in the Night's Watch knew that the bastard had a white direwolf, but none was as tall as this grey one. The bloody mouth was ready to bite Tyrion's head, and Tyrion was pressed to the ground by the strong wolf claws. Chapter 11 Wolf King. With a clang, the sword came out of its sheath. Winter Night rushed towards the wolf's head with swiftness. The cold light flashed, like black ice under the scorching sun. The wolf was naturally alert. It looked up, and saw the steel blade coming. It jumped up with its palms, and dodged like a nimble shadow, landing 4 or 5 feet away. The horse moved around in fear. If Cole hadn't clamped the horse's belly tightly with his back, it would have fled into the mountains and forests. "Don't panic, man, it's just a beast," Cole muttered to himself, as if comforting the old horse under him. Euron and several night watchmen and Tyrion's guards were also comforting their mounts. The grey dire wolf's fierce eyes flashed blood, its teeth were bared, its back was straight, and it uttered a low growl. Tyrion was lying on the ground wailing. His mare was frightened and neighed, and fled into the woods, but Euron, who was quick-handed and quick-eyed, grabbed the reins. Cole jumped off his horse, holding the sword in one hand, and faced the dire wolf. He stared at the wolf's bloodshot eyes and asked Tyrion beside him softly, "How is it? Can I get up? My legs are cramping, and I feel my ribs are broken." Tyrion looked painful, and his hands and feet were shaking. The dire elf moved left and right as if trying to find Cole's weakness. At this time, the guard Jack and the night watchman also approached the two. The experienced night watchman Yoren said worriedly, "Wolves are not solitary animals." This was a word of wisdom. When the dire elf stared at them fiercely, pairs of green eyes in the shadows of the surrounding trees slowly approached like fireflies in the summer night. At this time, Tyrion was helped up by another of his guards, Morris. His sword wielder, like Viggy, was usually responsible for taking care of Tyrion's food, accommodation and feeding horses. 3 black-shirted brothers leaned against Cole's side, and Tyrion's guards protected him. Soon, those green eyes revealed their fangs. All of them were snow wolves. It seemed that this dire wolf was their leader. Yoren knew that, as long as the wolf leader did not retreat, the wolf pack would not retreat, so they had to capture the leader first. He gritted his teeth and said, "We have to kill this big guy first, otherwise no one can escape." The size of an adult dire wolf is like a calf. Not to mention, that he would not be able to take advantage, even if they attacked together. The rangers of the Night's Watch may have some experience in dealing with dire wolves and snow bears, but Yoren is just an official who travels between the 7 kingdoms. The wolves surrounded them in a circle, like hunters hunting deer. Fortunately, the other 2 black shirts who followed them south were good Night's Watchmen. As long as everyone worked together, they would not necessarily be defeated. In addition to sticking together, wolves are also very smart animals. At least they know how to retreat when they encounter difficulties, and not to fight to the death on a rock. But if Cole and the others show cowardice or fear, the wolf pack will quickly detect it. Follow my orders, and do not act without authorization. The oldest, Yoren, shouted. Cole held the Winter Knight tightly. It was impossible not to be nervous. This would be a battle of life and death. Hot sweat could not help but see between his fingers. His eyes were bright, and time began to slow down. With the eye of time, he could see every step of the Wolf King. If we are surrounded by wolves, it will be the end. Tyrion seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. He really regretted not listening to old Mormondo's suggestion to send some people to escort him. This was the second time he was pounced by the damn wolf, and this time the injury was much more serious. The back was hit, and the ribs were not sure whether they were broken or not. Anyway, it felt like a needle piercing him. The pain made him almost faint, but if he fell asleep now, he would never wake up. Someone has to hold this monster back, otherwise we can't break out, Yoren said. Who would be so selfless as to stay and use his life to cover the rear? Everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. If they hesitated, the flaw would appear. The Wolf King seized the opportunity and pounced on the guard Morris. The 4 people on Cole's side huddled together, so there would be no loopholes, but a weak dwarf with a servant who couldn't use a sword would have too many loopholes, and it was hard not to show fear in the face of this huge monster. Morris looked at the giant shadow coming from the sky in astonishment. He raised his sword in his arm, but was pounced on by the Wolf King before he could block it. The giant fang pierced his arm, and he felt that his bones were about to be crushed in this bloody mouth. Cole and the other 4 moved quickly and came to support with swords, but the tacit understanding of the wolf pack was obviously much better than Th's. Seeing the boss taking the lead, the wolves also rushed over like a tide. Cole was the fastest. After only a few steps, he leaned to the side of the Wolf King and swung his sword to cut. The winter night was like a waning moon, shining, drawing an arc in the air. The Wolf King was biting Morris, and he resisted like a helpless lamb under the wolf's claws. The Wolf King sensed danger and let go of his prey to evade, but the Eye of Time had already discovered its trajectory. The sword that was originally swinging across the sky suddenly stopped and turned from slashing to stabbing. Cole stepped on the rock with his heels and jumped up with his hind legs. Winter night was like a rainbow piercing the sun, approaching the Wolf King, leaping in the air, and it was no longer able to dodge. A fierce wolf howl was deafening. Cole held the sword and smashed it to the ground with the Wolf King. Winter night went straight into the ribs of the dire wolf. The sword had penetrated more than a foot. Even if it could not kill it, it was severely injured. Sure enough, It jumped up again, after falling to the ground, and rushed towards Cole with a fierce look, but the blood gushing from the wound still betrayed it. The sword of Winter Night was stained with red. Cole shook his hand and pulled it. Blood drops flew, and the sword's surface regained its cold light. The wolf's eyes showed the intention of retreating. The blood seemed to stimulate Cole's nerves, and he roared, "Beast, come again." The roar was so loud that it was no wonder that Commander-in-Chief Codgel praised him as a natural ranger. The dire wolf was frightened and took a few steps back. Looking at Cole's angry eyes, it growled and staggered back. Everyone stared at Cole in amazement as he drove the wolves away. Cole's chest rose and fell, and his pupils slowed down. His eyes had long been blood red, no less than those of the dire wolves. He waited until the wolves were completely hidden in the mountains and forests, before he lowered his arms and raised his head to exhale deeply. After surviving the disaster, everyone relaxed physically and mentally. Euron was the most experienced one, and he said hurriedly, "The wolves are not far away. They are very vengeful. We have to leave quickly." Cole shook his head and strode towards his old horse. When he passed by Tyrion, he asked, "How is it? Can I ride a horse?" Tyrion seemed to be still shocked by Cole's great power. He stared at Cole with an incredible look. Cole frowned and muttered, "Are you scared?" Tyrion raised his eyebrow and pointed, "This big head is very smart." Chapter 12. The Starks of Winterfell. The light filled the sky with red clouds, penetrating through the layers of tree shadows. They hurried along the muddy path full of thorns. The heavy shadows were like an endless abyss. The cold breeze blew around them, as if there were pairs of eyes peeping through the fog. Until the shadows under a huge guard tree dissipated, the view in front of them suddenly became clear. There were flat hills, brown land, and the afterglow sprinkled in the eyes. The colors of dusk were all over the eyes, splendid the whole world. When they got here, everyone could finally breathe a sigh of relief. This damn wolf forest was just as weird as the forest called Ghost Forest outside the Great Wall. The flat wilderness was endless. There was an abandoned manor on the edge of the wolf forest. This was one of the strongholds of the Night's Watch going south. After seeing the house, the stone in everyone's heart finally fell steadily. At least there was no need to worry about being attacked by monsters here. Tyrion was led by his servant. He could no longer ride a horse by himself. When he dismounted, his legs were still twitching, and he had to rely on Morris to help him walk. Going south from here, there will be more traces of people and villages. In about 5 days, we will reach Winterfell. Euron said as he walked this long way. He has been walking this road for nearly 20 years, but this is the first time he has been so dangerous. Monsters like dire wolves did not appear at the southern end of the wall before. Cole sat down and closed his eyes in deep thought, without saying a word. Everyone thought he was still suffering from the sequelae of the battle. After making a fire and cooking some wild vegetable soup and soaking rye bread, they had a simple meal and leaned on the straw pile of the manor to sleep. Cole, the hero who drove away the wolves, did not have to stand guard at night. He slept soundly and woke up in a daze the next morning. They had already packed their things for departure and waited for Cole to wake up by the fire. Cole could only scratch his head and smile bitterly. In fact, his consumption was not great. It was just that his spirit was depleted after using the Eye of Time. That's why he was so sleepy. It seems that this is also a sequelae. The journey in the next few days was much smoother. The next day, after leaving the wolf forest, they saw a village. They stayed in a farmhouse for one night. Damn Tyrion, who was disabled but strong-willed, even molested the girl. Continuing south, the terrain became flatter, and the whistling north wind slowed down. For Cole, who grew up on the wall, the absence of the biting wind was like removing a layer of shackles from him. He couldn't help but want to gallop on the plain, but he still suppressed the throbbing in his heart. Tyrion's injuries have improved a lot, and now he is riding his mare again. He said that this was given to him by his brother Jaime on his naming day. These days, he has been writing and drawing something. Cole came up to see it. It seems to be a design drawing. It should be prepared for the poor child Brandon Stark. After all, Tyrion promised Jon Snow to help his brother. Cole also promised to go and see the child. The name Brandon seems to be the hereditary name of the Stark family. The famous Brandon the Builder in history is exactly the same as the name of this child. The people of Westeros are not as taboo about the names of their ancestors as the people of the Celestial Empire. Instead, they like to use those famous ancestors to crown their descendants. For example, the Stark family should have hundreds of Brandons. Winterfell is in front. Yoren pointed to the towering castle and said to Cole, "It is estimated that Cole has never seen this scene. Indeed, no matter in his past life or this life, he has never seen this kind of stone castle up close, and our hometown does not build this thing." The history of Winterfell is also related to the Brandon the Builder. At that time, the human race, the children of the forest and the giants were still in the honeymoon period. Winterfell and the Wall of Despair were built by the three tribes together. Now there are no traces of the children of the forest and the giants in the south of the wall. Of course, this involves the invasion of the Andals. Cole does not know much about this. The Library of the Wall will not record those things that happened in the south. Outside Winterfell is the Wintering Town. Although it is a little prosperous, there are few people here. Almost half of the houses are empty. This town is just like its name. It can only wait for winter to be lively. They walked towards the castle in a dusty manner. People retreated along the way. Some curious eyes looked at them, but they lost interest when they saw the crows. Compared with the king's gorgeous carriage, these crows were much shabby. Crows are a derogatory term for the Night's Watch in the Seven Kingdoms. After all, they are all black. Tyrion's servant went up to show his identity. The heavy bolt was pulled up by the iron chain. The guards had already gone to the main castle to report their arrival. Stark received Lannister and the crows in the hall. Maesters, knights, and servants filled the hall, and the lord of the city, Robb Stark, sat on a high chair. As soon as he came in, the condensed aura unfolded. Robb put on leather clothes and buckled mail, and the guards lined up between the two walls. The man in the high position had a stern look. Two young men stood beside him, all wearing armor. Tyrion looked around, his face full of confusion. At this time, Lord Robb said, "As long as you are a brother of the Night's Watch, we welcome you." Yoren and the other two saluted. Cole, who was also wearing ink, looked a little different, but he was not a black-shirted brother. "As long as you are a brother of the Night's Watch, I don't count. Is that what you mean, kid?" Tyrion asked in a mocking tone. The two began to argue with each other, and Robb even drew his sword. Tyrion didn't want to argue with this little brat, this group of boring Starks, so he directly stated his purpose. Robb was also stunned when he heard that Tyrion wanted to see Bran, and then asked the big man Hodder to carry Bran up. His legs had been deformed by the fall, and he probably wouldn't be able to stand up in this life. Tyrion took out the drawings he had prepared for several days. Winterfell didn't welcome him, and he didn't want to stay here. Suddenly, the door opened, and a little guy led a group of dire wolves into the hall. When they saw these wolves, everyone couldn't help but tremble in their hearts, and Tyrion shrank his neck. The wolves seemed to dislike him by nature, and walked towards Tyrion with their teeth bared. Tyrion was so scared that he hid towards Cole, and saw that his winter night had been pulled out half a foot. He was not afraid of these little guys. They were far less oppressive than those in the wolf forest. The guard Harris Moran's eyes were sharp, and he dared to draw his sword in Winterfell, which was very courageous. Lord Robb still drove away the group of wolf cubs. The Maester looked at the blueprint and said something in his ear, and Robb suddenly forced out a kind voice to invite Tyrion to stay. Tyrion just sneered. "Boy, stop pretending." He turned around with his guards and left, and suddenly asked Cole, "Are you going with us or staying here?" "I have reached my destination, Tyrion," Cole answered with some sadness. He wanted to follow Tyrion to the south, but because of his affection for the Wolf family and his admiration for Robb, he decided to stay in Winterfell. A good bird chooses a tree to roost in. Looking at the Seven Kingdoms, it should be difficult for a talented person to match Robb, the young wolf. How far would Robb go if he did not die at the Red Wedding? Maybe the next time they meet, they will be enemies. Lannister. The rebellion of the Five Kings is his best chance to upgrade his rank. With both strength and opportunity, he naturally won't think about finding a place to hide. Tyrion just nodded coldly. "It's up to you," but Stark seems to only welcome the Night's Watch. Looking at the short figure walking away until he disappeared at the door of the hall. After walking out of Winterfell Castle, the short man finally showed sadness on his face. He didn't want to show other emotions in front of Stark. Parting can sometimes really make you sad, especially in this era, where we don't know when we will meet again. The horses are slow and the carriages are far away. Maybe parting means never seeing each other again. Born lonely as a dwarf, he doesn't have many friends, only Cole and Jon, plus his brother Jaime. Being dissolute and talkative is just his protective color. He cherishes every relationship. There is no one like Cole who does not discriminate against him and is willing to be his friend in the Seven Kingdoms, and he still owes him his life. Jack, can you help me pass a message to Cole, Lannister? Debts must be repaid. Chapter 13 Night. After Lannister left Winterfell, the Stark ceremonial formation also disbanded. I have sent someone to prepare the room. Robb said a few polite words hesitantly, and it was easy to hear that he had memorized them on purpose. The 14-year-old Lord of Winterfell still seemed too immature, even though he was only temporarily managing Winterfell on behalf of his father. His blue eyes and reddish-brown hair were inherited from his mother, which was very different from his father. On the contrary, the illegitimate son Jon Snow looked more like a Stark. It was precisely because Jon Snow looked too much like Eddard that he often irritated Catelyn Tully, the mistress of Winterfell. Appearance seemed to lead destiny. In the history of the Targaryen family, those crown princes who were not born with silver hair and purple eyes seemed to have difficulty ascending the Iron Throne. Just like Prince Baelor, the spearbreaker whom Cole admired the most. As a crown prince, he had a Dornish face like his mother, and as expected, he was unable to ascend the Iron Throne to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Of course, this is just a bunch of idle fate theorists making alarmist remarks, but Robb seems unable to escape the curse of such fate. Some people's personality charm can be seen in history books and biographies, which makes people admire them. Whether reading novels in the previous life or opening history books in the library of Winterfell, Cole was deeply impressed by the charm of Prince Baelor. It was Robb's same qualities that attracted Cole's heart to follow him. The Stark family is sometimes naive, but their qualities are absolutely unique in the Seven Kingdoms. Lord Stark. Cole suddenly called Robb, who was about to leave. He looked over in confusion. A young night watchman? Jon entrusted me to give you a letter. He took out the letter written by Jon Snow and did not use the seal wax, but simply sealed it with some resin. Robb took the letter and didn't seem to plan to open it right now. He just told his men, receive the brothers of the Night's Watch well. Cole was not sure whether this letter from Jon Snow could be used as a token of his loyalty. He hadn't read what was written in it. After all, it was a letter from someone else. Maybe it was just a casual mention at the end. We can only pray that our Lord Robb is not like those people who read novels and read 10 lines at a glance. The guest rooms in Winterfell are much more comfortable than farms and wilderness. At least for Cole now, it is already the ultimate enjoyment. The woolen bed quilt is so much softer than the broken leather mattress Cole slept on the Great Wall. Thinking of the more luxurious velvet and silk, Cole couldn't help but begin to yearn for it. When he becomes a lord in the future, he will drink wine every day like Tyrion, eat steak every meal, wear velvet and silk clothes, and sleep in a warm bed stuffed with feathers. He patted his head. Damn, he came from the great heaven. He has enjoyed everything from air conditioning to hot pot. How could he have such a country bumpkin's idea? Well, the environment changes people. A person who can't even afford a meal doesn't have the energy to think about the finer things. He took his first bath in his life. Winterfell, which is built on a hot spring, will not lack this bath water. It is said that the main castle is built on a spring, and the walls are full of hot springs, which makes the main castle full of warmth at all times. Cole and his friends naturally don't live in the main castle. Winterfell has a special place to receive guests. In an open-air hot spring, Cole took off his clothes and soaked in it. The water temperature was about 40 degrees. He raised his hand and rubbed it, and instantly dug out a pile of black mud. His somewhat fair face couldn't help but flush. He kept rubbing his skin red, from top to bottom, and when he stood up, his whole body was flushed. After washing his body, he didn't want to put on the grey clothes, but he could only pinch his nose to put them on. When he returned to his guest house, Yoren just came out of the door. He asked, "We have arrived at Winterfell. What are you going to do next?" Everyone thought that he would follow the little dwarf to the south. After all, the atmosphere of nights there is much stronger than in the north. His dream of knighthood is well known in the Night's Watch. Although Cole wanted to get close to the Wolf family, he had to be recognized by them. He couldn't just beg them with flattery. He couldn't learn to flatter. And it doesn't mean that you will be favored by the Starks if you are humble. They seem to appreciate the tough guys more, commonly known as honor. I want to take a look at Winterfell first. After all, it's the first time I've seen such a big castle. Maybe after seeing enough of the north, I'll go south. Grandpa Riemann wants me to see more of the Seven Kingdoms. It's good that you have ideas. As an elder, Yoren thought he still had to give this young junior some advice. The Seven Kingdoms are not as safe as you think. Don't be brave when you encounter danger. Those greedy guys just want your money. He thought for a moment and continued, Knights are not as simple as you think, child. Maybe you will be unhappy to say this, but your identity has determined some things. Not everyone can become Sir Duncan the Tall. The legendary King Sigurd, Duncan the Tall, a knight who broke out of the flea pits in King's Landing. It is rumored that he is more than 2 meters tall and is also called the Giant Knight. Cole looked at the Winter Knight in his hand. Although his height is not that abnormal, his strength should be enough. Knighthood is not just a goal, but also a process, isn't it? Yoren smiled, thinking that it's always good for young people to be passionate. What's the point of living day by day like these old guys? You should drink the strongest wine and sleep with the most beautiful girls, so that you can show off when you are old. Don't think that knights are too glamorous. Most knights are in the same situation as the Night's Watch. They are just a group of warhounds who beg for a living. They run wherever there is a war. Their daily life is similar to what Yoren thought. They drink and whore, spend all their money and then sleep. When they have time, they pretend to be bandits and rob. The nobles play a different game from the common people. Their knights are Prince Bela, Prince Aemon the Dragon Ridder, Sir Duncan the Tall, and Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Dawn. They are brilliant and famous. Who would remember a so-called knight who died of freezing on the King's Road with tattered armor, a skinny horse, and a sword covered with rust? Knights are indeed cool, but it is definitely unrealistic for him to travel around the world like a ranger and practice the way of knights. He is not a middle school boy. He admires those noble knights, but it does not mean that he wants to learn that. What he wants is to board the ship of a group of nobles in this evil Middle Ages and live his life as a lord. Winterfell will be the first stop to sound the horn of his journey. Even if he can't change Robb Stark's fate in the end, at least he can make a name for himself in the upcoming rebellion of the Five Kings. Troubled times always allow him, a prophet, to seize opportunities. Lord Stark, you invited us to dinner, don't forget it. Yoren reminded. Cole took a short rest in the room and wiped the steel sword Winter Knight. He felt that it seemed to be Valyrian steel, but he was not very sure. Grandpa Riemann said that Valyrian steel was not so easy to refine. After nightfall, the servants of the main castle came to call them. It was Lord Robb who had prepared a dinner for him. Cole followed the 3 brothers of the Night's Watch to the hall again. There was no big banquet. It looked like a family banquet of the nobles, but for Cole and his friends, it was a very luxurious scene. Yoren was used to it. Cole was indeed curious about the banquet of the nobles, but he was soon disappointed. He felt that it was no different from the usual dinners of the Night's Watch. Cole and his friends were placed on the right side. Except for the Stark family and the Maester, their positions also looked very particular. Although the status of the Night's Watch was not high, as guests, the Stark family still gave them enough respect. Robb was eating the pork sausage on the plate, and was also thinking about how to lead some topics to make the dinner less silent. After all, he was the host. If Robb didn't speak, no one dared to speak. I have read Jon's letter. Finally, he looked at Cole. To Robb Stark, if you read this letter, I have already established myself in the Night's Watch. I will soon become an honorary ranger, and then the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. You can learn needlework from the girls. I will protect you. I'm glad that the gods have awakened Bran. You can give my things to Rickon. He should be very happy. Cole is my best friend in the Night's Watch. I hope you can let him stay in Winterfell. He must be a good assistant. You can let him protect you when I'm away. Jon. Chapter 14 Cook. The tone was exactly Jon Snow's. Thank you for taking care of Jon. Winterfell always welcomes like-minded friends. Lord Stark, this is definitely the right decision for you. Care's barbecue is the best on the wall. The Night's Watch brother took a bite of the meat pie and took a sip of ale. Everyone in Winterfell smiled knowingly, obviously not caring. What good cooks can there be on the wall? The good cooks are all serving the nobles. Sir, the kitchens in Winterfell are always short of people, Mr. Luwin suggested to Robb. The last time the king held a reception, the kitchen was a mess. Isn't that perfect? He can stay in the kitchen to cook for us. Little Bran was in a good mood after learning from the Maester that the saddle made by the devil could allow him to ride a horse. Robb was thoughtful and glanced at his other brother Theon Greyjoy. He squinted his eyes and smiled silently. He was always smiling. You are the Lord of Winterfell. You don't have to ask anyone, Theon said to him. Robb nodded. Then please ask this brother from the Night's Watch to stay in the kitchen for a while. Colton paused. He looked at Euron, only to see him shaking his head helplessly. The talkative Night's Watch brother seemed to realize that his words were misunderstood. He stopped the fork with sausage next to the corner of his mouth and apologized to Cole with his eyes. Cole stood up, imitated the knight's etiquette taught by Jon, and greeted Robb. Thank you, Lord Stark. But I think you misunderstood. Before he finished speaking, Euron pulled his clothes. Cole didn't understand, but still sat down. It seemed to be a happy occasion, but Robb was actually a little distressed. He didn't like Cole's behavior, but he was just inconvenienced by Jon's face. Fame and fortune should be taken with one's own hands, just like Jon went to the Night's Watch. He thought to himself, if this boy who looked like a knight really wanted honor, why didn't he stay at the wall? Captain Harris Moran of the guards also noticed that Cole was performing the knight's salute. He wanted to remind his young master that it was very rude to decide the appointment of a knight so rashly. But seeing Robb forcing a smile, he chose to shut up obediently. The 14-year-old child's expression management was still too shallow. Everyone in Winterfell could see that he was tired of the daily life of the lord of the city, but he was a Stark and had to learn to manage the north. The banquet came to an end, and the chefs and servants would clean up the mess. That night, Cole lay on the cashmere bed, feeling a little empty in his heart. This strange place was where he would live in the future. He had read about Winterfell countless times in books, but he felt endless emptiness when he was here in person. Everything here was strange, as cold as the cold wind in the north. This is not the Night's Watch, Cole. The words of the nobles can only be a gift to you, not a rejection. This is what Euron said to him. At this moment, he also understood Jon's feelings. I think Jon was also like this in the north. He found that fantasy and reality were very different. If he and Jon exchanged identities, he would definitely be very happy. He could see the reluctance on the face of the young wolf. Did Jon say something in the letter? Impossible. On the wall, Jon sniffed and sneezed after feeling itchy. He was on patrol, and it was often his turn at night. I think it was Sir Aliza and the night watchman who was responsible for arranging patrols who said something, but he would not give in. Since Cole and Tyrion left, he gradually became familiar with the guys he once hated, and he would no longer be lonely and complain about everything every day. The next day, the night watchmen were about to leave. The two night watchmen escorting Lannister were going back to the wall, and Euron was going to find Tyrion and then go south together. Tyrion's squire Jack was waiting outside Winterfell, which made Euron flattered. However, Jack walked up to Cole and said, Lord Tyrion asked me to tell you that he owes you a life. Lannister, a debt must be paid. Cole smiled and said, please tell your lord that Cole will go to Casterly Rock to find him and ask him to prepare some red. Watching them walk away, Cole suddenly felt like leaving with them. If he asked, Tyrion would take him with him, but he remembered the look in Tyrion's eyes when he walked out of the castle, which was disappointment. Child, your name is Cole, right? Luwin, who was wearing a bachelor's robe and a metal chain, asked him. Yes, master. Maester Luwin was a kind old man. He said gently. The butler Vayan Podol followed the duke to the south. I will take care of some things in the castle temporarily. I will take you to find the chef. He should be busy in the back room. Thank you. Maester Luwin showed a gentle smile and then led Cole to the kitchen. The kitchen was also responsible for the food of hundreds of people. Compared with the cold and quiet hall, it was really bustling here. The chef Gage was a fat dwarf with a thick beard. He spoke in a loud voice, penetrating the entire kitchen in the noise. "Gage." The maester called to him. The chef came over with short legs after seeing the maester. "Good afternoon, master. I wonder why you called me?" Maester Luwin introduced Cole to him. Gage looked at Cole in confusion, but no one had told him in advance that someone would come to the kitchen. Almost all the people here were arranged by him, and many of them were his relatives. However, it was Maester Luwin who brought them here personally, which was probably not a simple matter. Gage had been the head chef in Winterfell for many years, and his daughter had grown up with the Stark kids, so he was not afraid of anyone threatening his position. So he patted his chest and said, "Maester, don't worry. I will take good care of the child." After the maester handed the person over, he left. Gage looked up at Cole. "You are quite tall, but too thin. But I promise that you will be as strong as a bull in 2 months after you come to the kitchen." "Hello, Master Chef." Gage nodded. He was the head chef of Winterfell and a person of status. Now that the newcomer was handed over to him, he had to teach him some kitchen rules first. "Come with me." Gage took Cole to familiarize himself with the kitchen and taught him some things that should be paid attention to in the castle, such as not setting foot in the living area of the Duke's family, not approaching the martial arts field when the guards are training, etc. In the castle, the status of the chef is the same as that of the groom and the servant. Although Westeros does not practice slavery, the servants living in the castle are almost equivalent to their domestic servants, serving them for generations. Cole has been carrying the steel sword Winter Knight on his back. The head chef pointed behind him and asked, "What is this?" "Don't bring some sundries to the kitchen in the future. On your first day here, just watch the fire on the side. After a few days, we will arrange your position after evaluating your cooking skills." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Kitchen. The kitchen is a place that wears out one's patience, especially a large kitchen that is responsible for hundreds of people and works on the assembly line every day. On the Great Wall, he was taken care of because of his previous weak health, and he only had to cook some soup every day. At this time, Cole was in charge of cutting onions. He had no protective gloves, so he covered his face with a piece of rag. Even so, he was laughed at by other cooks, saying that he was as hypocritical as a noble lady. The head chef Gage was also dissatisfied with his behavior and had been trying to make him unhappy in the past few days. The taste of onions is very strong, and the juice is hot when soaked in the hands for a long time, and the eyes are often smoked to tears. No wonder he was given this job. The onions shipped to the kitchen every day are transported in carts. As a cook servant of Winterfell, he naturally can no longer enjoy the guest's single room, but lives with a group of cooks of different ages. Every morning, he is woken up from the bed by the head chef Gage with a ghost-like voice, and then he is thrown into a day of tiring work. There is no so-called rest day, and there is no rest all year round. Sometimes, when the Lord has to receive guests, they have to work until late at night. Chefs do more odd jobs, relying on physical strength rather than skills. The only real chef is the head chef, who is personally responsible for the meals of several young masters and young ladies in the castle every day. Cole was carrying a large box of ingredients through the front yard of the castle. The morning sun had just cut through a corner of the night like a sharp sword, and the sky was still grey. Passing by the martial arts field, he saw a man swinging a sword on the training ground. He couldn't help but stop and look, just like watching the Night Watch brothers training on the Great Wall in the past. The man seemed to have noticed that someone was probing him. He turned his head and met Cole's gaze. Sir Harris Moran recognized this man as the boy who drew the sword in the hall at a glance. He was wearing a tattered cloth robe and holding a large box of ingredients on his chest. Sir Moran nodded to him, and Cole nodded in response. Cole retracted his gaze and turned to the kitchen. Moran continued his morning exercise. He was able to take over the position of captain of the guards after Jory left Winterfell, which was naturally inseparable from his diligence. "Hey, Harris. You are the first one again." Other guards also came one after another. If you don't get up earlier, how can you tame these bastards? Oh, Captain. You really should go to King's Landing with the Duke. He has always appreciated your diligence, and may even recommend you to serve as a king's guard for the Fat King. You know what? I really hope to go to the south with the Duke. I heard that there is a whole street of brothels there, and I heard that there are birdmen from the Summer Islands. A guard followed and responded. Damn it, now is not the time for you to talk about prostitutes. Go train all of you. Morin roared. Cole carried the box to the kitchen storage room. The cooks in the kitchen were busy with their work listlessly, while Chef Gage was like a cock with a high spirit, patrolling around and scolding lazy guys. Seeing Cole walk out of the storage room, he stepped over with great momentum, pointed at Cole's head and cursed, "My gods, are you hiding in the storage room and being lazy? If you don't want to go back to your Great Wall, go cut all the onions for me." Cole lowered his head, his face flashed with anger. "Okay, Master Chef. Don't think about explaining anything to him, he just doesn't like you." The people around cast gloating eyes. They all know that cutting onions is a hard job. This new kid somehow offended Master Chef. Now he has to suffer. At first, Gage didn't bother to pay attention to this kid, but later the adult said something to him, which made Gage more and more difficult for the child. Although the man was just the adopted son of the Duke, it was better to offend a kid from the Night Watch than to offend the adult. "If you don't cut all the onions, don't even think about eating your lunch today," Gage shouted behind him. He looked at those who were gloating over the misfortune of others. "You too." In an instant, the kitchen became bustling with activity. They couldn't live without food. Their kitchen was the most profitable job in the castle. They came here just for the good food. Cole looked at his red hands. If he continued like this, he wouldn't know if his hands would be disabled, not to mention holding a sword. He crushed a rotten onion into pieces, and the juice flowed in his hands. He really wanted to throw the things away and walk away, but after thinking about it, he couldn't help but sigh. Maybe it was just the little devil in the kitchen who was difficult to deal with. The Stark family was at least an honorable family, and would not make things difficult for him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't annoyed. He came here with a passion, thinking that he could make great achievements here, but what was he doing now? Someone saw Cole in a daze, and quietly came to Gage's side and whispered something. Sure enough, the short fat man rushed over with a face full of anger, and hit Cole on the back with a stick. "You son of a bitch, you are being lazy again." Cole felt a burning sensation on his back, and he couldn't help thinking in his heart that, if he had the chance, he would definitely get back at him. He remembered grudges, but also remembered favors. He lowered his head and silently broke onions. Seeing Cole silent, Gage sneered and walked away. The guy who informed thought he had provided the chef with incredible information, and was feeling proud, but Gage also hit him with a stick. "You are not working hard, what are you thinking about?" The Duke of Winterfell is a man who values honor, and these servants naturally follow their master, and this kind of snitch is never liked. The informer did not dare to blame the chef, and could only cast a fierce look at Cole. Working from morning till night, even though Cole's physique had improved, he still felt a little exhausted. After finishing his work, he walked back to his residence with a tired body. He was almost the last to leave. The onions on the Lord's table were consumed very quickly. This kind of food that can drive away the cold is very popular in the north. Originally, it was a job for several people, but now it was handed over to Cole alone. When he returned to his residence, it was noisy inside. The room that originally had 5 people was now crowded with people. In the middle of the crowd, a man was dancing with a sword, throwing some bones and rotten meat that he had secretly brought from the kitchen into the sky, and then swinging the sword to chop. His funny appearance made the cooks laugh. When I was a child, a knight praised me for my good sword swinging. If my father hadn't disagreed with me being a squire, I might have been an honorary knight of the 7 kingdoms now. The guy swinging the sword was the one who informed in the kitchen. "You kid is talking nonsense. The sword you are dancing with looks like a dwarf jester. You should go dance for the king, or be a eunuch." Everyone laughed again. At this time, the people outside noticed that Cole walked in with a gloomy face, and their smiles disappeared instantly. Chapter 16, Judgment. "My lord, you should really go to the kitchen and take a look. The new guy is just a lazy guy. He doesn't sleep at night. Gage was bringing dinner to the table in the study. Lord Stark was handling government affairs. He complained on the side. Before he could finish, a guard pushed the door open and said, "My lord, something happened." Gage, the head chef, swallowed the words on his lips. Robb waved his hand to signal him to go down, but the guard spoke first. "Someone is rioting in the castle. Sir Moran has brought people over. He asked me to tell you." Hearing about the riot, Robb stood up suddenly. "Recently, it has been a turbulent time. Bran fell from the building, his father went south, and his mother was assassinated. Now someone is rioting in the castle again." He was furious. This was a challenge to the dignity of the Stark family. "Call all the guards over." He picked up the sword hanging on the wall with one hand and went straight out the door. Sir Harys Moran rushed to the servants' residence with a dozen guards. People gathered outside a room and looked inside. From time to time, some people pulled out of fear. The guards pushed the crowd to open a corridor. When Harris walked into the room, he saw 7 or 8 people lying here, wailing everywhere, and even some traces of blood. In the innermost part, a young man who was not very burly was wiping a sword with a piece of cloth with a cold look. The cold light was aggressive and matched his deep blue-purple eyes. The person lying on the ground suddenly reached out and hugged his legs, crying and shouting, "Lord Moran, you have to make a decision for us." The young man wiped his sword without anyone around. Moran naturally recognized the child. The two had just met in the morning. He pulled his legs apart and asked the person on the ground, "What happened?" At this time, another group of people rushed in, and when they saw the newcomers, they all saluted and greeted them. Robb walked to the side of the captain of the guard, Moran, with a stern face, followed by his adopted son Theon, who was still smiling. "Young master," Moran saluted. "What happened here, Harris?" Robb asked Harys Moran. Theon glanced at the scene. It seems that there was a fight, which is very common in the taverns outside the city. Those drunk guys always like to discuss things with fists. Moran looked at the young man inside, seeing that he sat there unmoved like a statue, and he didn't look drunk at all, but he still opened his mouth and muttered, "Maybe the cooks are drunk." "Lord Stark, you have to make the decision for us." The man crawled to Robb's feet, but this time he didn't dare to reach out to hug his legs. Tears and snot squeezed out of his swollen face, and his appearance made people laugh, but no one at the scene laughed. "This new guy," he turned his eyes to Cole, his body trembling. "He wanted to kill us, but Horn made a joke and he did it." Everyone looked at Cole, and Sir Moran couldn't help but sigh. How could there be no trouble if the knight was put in the kitchen? Eagles don't associate with sparrows. This kid dared to draw his sword under the gaze of all the guards of Winterfell in the hall. How could he be an ordinary person? Some of the people lying on the ground had fainted, and some were wailing. They cried about Cole's atrocities in twas and threes. Robb looked at the people lying on the ground and was shocked. Although these people were not warriors, it was not easy for one person to knock them all down. And it seemed that there were no knife wounds on their bodies, so this man didn't even use his sword. Cole slid the cloth from the hilt of the sword, and the cloth broke. He put the sword back into the sheath and slowly stood up. In an instant, those guys who fell to the ground couldn't help but shrink their bodies. The memory of being punched one by one was still vivid in his mind. Cole first walked up with a cold face, but Horn, this kid, didn't know the severity of the situation. He picked up the sword to provoke Cole, and even pretended to swing, but was knocked down by a heavy punch. He wanted to teach this newcomer a lesson, but he was a beast, and his fists were like hammers. The adopted son of the Stark family stared at Winter Knight. "Lord Stark, someone is making trouble in your castle now. This is a provocation to the majesty of the Stark family." Theon turned his head and said, "Catch him," Robb ordered coldly. What Theon said was right. No matter what the reason was, he had to show the majesty of the city lord at this moment. After receiving the order, the guards drew their swords and walked up. Cole did not resist, but just watched coldly. They were about to reach out to confiscate Cole's sword, but Cole grabbed their arms. "I don't think Winterfell is an unreasonable place." He looked directly at Robb. "Winterfell is not a place where a cook can act recklessly, Stark. If you agree, I can help you," Theon said ruthlessly with a disdainful smile. Hearing this, Sir Moran couldn't help but frown. "Young master, fighting will not be sentenced to death." Robb nodded and then ordered, bring them all to the hall. It's just a small matter. There is no need to go to trial. Theon said sarcastically on the side. Shut up, Theon. Robb scolded. The Stark family will guarantee justice for every citizen. Being taken to the hall was illuminated by candlelight. Robb Stark was sitting in the chair of the Guardian of the North. He was wearing grey black leather armor and plate armor on the outside. The emblem of the dire wolf was holding up the bearskin cloak. His red hair was like a blazing fire. He sat upright with a cold face. Sitting in front of you is the future Guardian of the North, the Duke of Winterfell, and the supreme ruler of the North, Robb Stark. Maester Luwin said in his gentle voice, tell us your story, and the Stark family will give you justice. Some people had just woken up, and were still confused about what happened. Lord Stark, this man is wielding a sword and committing murder. We just said a few words, but he wanted to kill people. The perpetrator horn pointed at Cole and said loudly, that's right, sir. We were just chatting and laughing in the room, and he came in and beat people indiscriminately, and his attack was ruthless. Another person echoed, kill him. Send him to the Night's Watch. Instantly, there was a chorus of condemnation in the hall, and all the spearheads were pointed at Cole, whose face was as calm as a lake. Quiet. Moran scolded. Lord Stark will judge. Robb looked at Cole. Cole, you can defend yourself. Yes, I started it first. As soon as Cole opened his mouth, the whole audience was in an uproar. You took my things without permission and insulted my ancestors. As a warrior, I have the right to challenge you to a duel. Everyone was shocked when he said this. Someone laughed. You call yourself a warrior, but you don't even have a surname. Who are your ancestors? Maybe it's a bastard born by a cousin. Go ask your cousin's mother if she is favored by a master. Maybe she can share a surname with Jon. Of course, Theon Greyjoy didn't say the rest. Cole frowned and looked at Theon. He didn't remember offending the adopted son of the Stark family. The two of them didn't even have any intersection. Chapter 17 Trial by Combat. What would he do if my father were here? Robb thought as he looked at the crowd of people talking in the hall. Theon's words were sharp as swords, and it was obvious that he was very hostile to this guy from the north. The people watching were all servants in the castle. They cheered and responded to Theon, demanding the trial of Cole. This boy of the same age as him was strong and tough. Even though he was criticized by thousands of people, he remained calm. Occasionally, he would refute, but it seemed extremely pale and powerless. In the flickering candlelight, everyone seemed to have a red face and looked furious. There were shouts, sobs, and even laughter in the hall. Little Bran, who was sleeping soundly, was awakened by the noise. Hodder was carrying him here. What happened? Bran Stark asked his brother. Robb forced a smile, as if he was doing something very easy. Bran, just some small things. In fact, he was a little tired of this kind of life. The Lord was much more tired than he thought. Bran looked around the hall with a puzzled look. This didn't look like a small matter. Master Bran, come sit next to me. The gentle Maester Luwin called to Bran. At this time, the hall was full of people. Theon stood up passionately. The perpetrator Cole, no one is here to testify for you now. It was Horn who touched your things. If you can't produce evidence, you will face charges of assault, fraud, and theft. Cole's chest was heaving with anger. After all, he couldn't debate with the scholars like Wu Hao. Seeing the charges being brought one by one, his defense was like a lone boat in the ocean, weak and powerless. Isn't it Stark who is in charge of Winterfell? Who are you? What right do you have to accuse me of a crime? He turned around and saluted Robb slightly. If Lord Stark really thinks I'm guilty, then I can only ask the gods to testify. I apply for a trial by combat. He stood up and looked around with his eyes as cold as ice and said, if you think I'm guilty, come and try to see if this sword is sharp. The knights were all angry. This man was so arrogant. When the 7 cooks heard that they were going to have a trial by combat, they were filled with fear. They looked at their Lord Stark with pleading eyes. It was fine to let them cook and drink and bully the newcomers, but a trial by combat was simply courting death. Theon narrowed his eyes and curved his lips. You are so arrogant. In that case, let me fight with your sword. Stark, I can fight for them. He looked at Robb and then jumped into the hall. He said sarcastically, didn't you ask who I am? Remember, the one who will take your life is the future master of the Iron Islands, Theon Greyjoy. Cole looked at this future stinky guy, the Lord of the Iron Islands. It's too early to say now. Maester Luwin leaned his head to Rob's ear and whispered a few words. Theon, that's enough. Rob's voice echoed throughout the hall. Theon was displeased, but he turned back with narrowed eyes and a smile. As you command, my lord. This is just a farce. It should end. Cole, I declare you not guilty, but you must pay the price for your atrocities. Leave Winterfell tonight. You are no longer welcome here. Rob's voice was as hard as Valyrian steel, and no one dared to question it. All eyes were on this arrogant guy. He stood with a sword, nodded, turned around and walked out of the hall. When he passed by a short and fat man, he raised his sword slightly, and the blade just happened to slap the guy in the face. Gage staggered back 2 steps, wanting to curse, but he had to hold it back because of the occasion. Then he glared at Cole, but could only watch the back of the figure leave. He looks so pitiful. Bran suddenly muttered. He is only responsible for his own mistakes, child. Maester Luwin taught on the side. Everyone should be responsible for his own actions. But he is Jon's friend. Bran wanted to meet his illegitimate brother very much. He felt that Jon's friends should be his friends. Robb pondered for a moment. Friend? Who was wrong? He felt that this farce-like trial did not look honorable at all. Cole held his sword and was wearing the tattered clothes of a cook. When he walked to the gate, the bolt was pulled high and the sound of iron chains was heard, just like the first time he walked into this castle. At that time, he was a guest. At this moment, he was more like an expellee, a real expellee. After walking out of the gate, he couldn't help but stop and look back. There were high towers, city walls and towering main castles. Ravens were flying in the air, imitating and calling, and shadows were covering them. The cold wind was unusually bleak. He took his first step into the north. How confident he was at that time. He was the darling of the Night's Watch, a lucky traverser, born with supernatural powers, and could slow down time. He thought he could fight with the young wolf and achieve great success. He thought he could start his dream-like legendary life from here. Reality is as cold as the snowflakes in the north. Look, it's snowing, and soon the whole north will be covered in silver. Winterfell will be bustling, and a grand harvest feast will be held in Winterfell. The nobles of the north will gather together to drink, sing and dance. Although the north is big, there is no place for Cole. The road of the kingdom is open, but it is full of confusion, whether to go north or south. At this moment, he finally recognized his status. He is just an orphan without any honor. He was fortunate to grow up on the Great Wall. He is not the king of something, or the son of something. He is an ordinary person under the starry sky of Westeros, and he should have worked hard on a piece of land until he died. Are you convinced? Why should you be convinced? Are kings, princes, generals and ministers kind? He looked at the wolf flag hanging in the snowy wind with a firm gaze. Snowflakes dripped onto his cheeks and evaporated into mist. At this moment, he was like a walking flame, and his shadow stretched out in the moonlight. The farce ended, and the crowd dispersed with a chattering sound, discussing what had just happened. Robb returned to his room. The cold wind blew in from the window, blowing the curtains wildly. He walked up to close the window, and then he realized that it was snowing. Snow was too sparse and common in the north, and it didn't even cause a ripple for him. As long as he went north, snow would fill the vast fields like it was free. But Winterfell hadn't seen snow for many years. It hadn't snowed since he was born, right? At least he had no memory of playing in the snow in Winterfell. He couldn't help but think of the words his father often said, "Winter is coming." Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door, and Robb called someone in. It was the captain of the guard, Harris Moran. As soon as Moran entered the room, he said hurriedly, "Master, Theon Greyjoy left Winterfell on horseback." Robb turned around abruptly. "What did you say?" Chapter 18. Force is better than hard work. The wind and snow were getting stronger and stronger. Under the waning moon, the sky and the earth were all white. Cole walked against the wind, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of cold. He walked on the King's Road, heading south. Whether it was to King's Landing, Casterly Rock, or even Dragonstone, there was always a place that could accommodate him, even if it was to dawn. Except for the sound of falling snowflakes, there was silence all around. I don't know how long I walked, but it was a complete chaos as far as the eye could see. At this time, there was the sound of horse hooves. Who was hurrying so late at night? He turned around and heard the sound of a sharp arrow piercing through the space. With a whoosh, a gust of wind blew past his ears. In the haze, Cole saw a figure holding a bow as big as the moon, pulling the string on the horse and looking straight at him. The man drew another arrow from the quiver under the horse. Even if he hesitated, he knew that this person had bad intentions. In an instant, the eye of time and space opened up, and the scattered snowflakes paused in the air. The man's movements were like snails crawling, like a frame of a photo moving. The eye of time not only slowed down time, but also allowed Cole to see farther and more clearly. The face of Theon Greyjoy was reflected in his pupils. It was him. He didn't understand why this man had repeatedly made things difficult for him in Winterfell, and now he wanted to kill him. Time resumed, and Theon bent his bow and arrowed smoothly. The Ironborn have always been famous for their bows and arrows, and as the future king of the Ironborn, he also put a lot of effort in using bows and arrows. At least at this distance, it was easy to kill this kid. He released the arrow and confidently watched the trajectory of the arrow feathers and attacked Cole. He deliberately aimed at the head, and the iron spike could penetrate the kid's head without a blink of an eye. With a turn of his head, the arrow passed through the side of the neck. Cole walked up slowly, with one hand bent to his back to take the sword. Good luck. Theon spat secretly, and continued to draw the bow and arrow. With a whoosh, the arrow was dodged by Cole again with a turn of his body. Now Theon finally knew that this kid was extraordinary. He drew out 2 arrows in succession and shot them out in quick succession. He thought to himself, let's see how you can dodge them. Cole turned his head and swung his sword, knocking away and dodging the 2 arrows one after another. Damn it. Theon pulled the reins tightly and rode his horse back. The distance between them was only 10 feet. Cole rushed forward, and before the horse could start, he had already raised his sword to kill Theon on horseback. The sword blade flew through the snow and rushed directly to Theon on horseback. He was startled and used his bow to block. The string broke, and it was pulled away with a snap, and even the bow was cut in two. Theon fell off his horse, but Cole would not hold back, and continued to kill with his sword. Seeing the cold light coming, Theon remained calm in a hurry, and used the broken bow to pull Cole's ankle, but it had little effect. Cole raised his sword, and stabbed it hard, killing Theon. Theon reached out to grab the sword blade, and his fur gloves were instantly pierced. Pain came from his palm, and he suddenly regretted that he should not have been so reckless. The blade was getting closer and closer to his chest. Theon gritted his teeth, and pushed the blade to the side. He turned and rolled over, rolling several times on the snow, and then quickly climbed up. He drew the iron sword from his waist, half bent to stabilize his lower body, and moved left and right to unfold his posture, which was exactly what Jon taught Cole. You are indeed an extraordinary cook. His hands were shaking, and blood dripped onto the snow along with the hilt, staining the white black. It was originally hazy, with a dim blue light mixed with white, and the bright red was just a bit of ink black. Theon of the Greyjoy family, we should not have any hatred, right? You were aggressive in the hall, and now you are attacking me with bows and arrows. Do you really think I'm easy to bully? Pooh, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell on his face, when he fell off the horse just now. Ironborn do not need a reason to do things. Force is better than hard work. If you want to blame someone, blame the inappropriate things on you. What on Cole could catch his eye? A ragged chef's shirt, a pair of worn leather boots of a night watchman, and winter nights. So that's why he was attracted to his sword. Humph, so you are greedy. Cole stepped on the snow. Be prepared to accept retribution for greed. A round sword light was like a waning moon. Theon swung his sword to block it, only to feel his arm being pulled violently, and the wound on his palm split wildly, and blood fell. Cole held the sword with both hands, and the cold light after images were as dense as the stars in the sky. Theon struggled to block it, and felt that his hand was going to be crippled with every blow. Theon shouted in his heart, what kind of monster is this? Oh no, he was startled. Cole's sword actually changed its trajectory, and slashed towards his thigh like a clever silver thread. Ah! With a scream, Theon fell to the ground in pain, and the sword fell off. He hugged his thigh covered with blood and wailed. Cole kicked his sword away and stepped forward. Every step was like a loud bang in Theon's heart. His face was full of fear, and he screamed in his heart, no, he can't die. He still wants to inherit the Iron Islands and become the supreme king of the Ironmen. Don't kill me, don't kill me, please. He cried bitterly and begged humbly. Cole raised his sword. He would not show mercy to the enemy, and there was no need to keep such a bastard. Killing him might be a big help to Robb Stark. Theon's eyes, which often squinted with a smile, stared in fear. His mouth opened wide, tears like a pillar, snot flowed into his mouth, and he stared at the blue cold light approaching under the moonlight. At this moment, he felt that death was so close, until a loud shout like an oracle from the gods, stop. The horse's hooves galloped, shaking the world. Cole stopped the sword, turned his head to look at the person coming, and sighed in his heart. It seems that this idiot can't be killed. A bunch of northern cavalry surrounded Cole and Theon. Cole retracted his sword, looked up at Robb Stark, and turned around without saying a word. He pushed aside the cavalry, and walked towards Theon's horse. He jumped on the horse, and shouted to Theon Greyjoy lying on the ground, I'll spare your life, take care of yourself. The cavalry wanted to stop him, but Robb Stark stopped them. They watched his back as he rode, until he disappeared into the sky. If you don't help me up, you can only take a corpse back. Theon groaned in pain. Robb Stark felt that Theon, who was always smart in the past, looked so stupid, but after all, he had the name of Brotherhood. He ordered his men to take Theon with him, and then turned back to Winterfell. Do you know what you are doing? Robb asked him along the way. I have already declared him innocent. Do you want to make Stark lose his credibility? Robb, I'm already like this. You should let the Maester take a look for me first. He raised his bloody hand, and at the same time thought in his heart, I'm not a Stark. What does Stark's honor have to do with me? Humph. Everyone is responsible for their own actions, Theon. Even if you are killed, it is your own fault. Robb Stark rode forward. Theon Greyjoy gritted his teeth secretly. Chapter 19 World. Over a black linen shirt, he wore a leather armor that had been worn to the point of silk threads. It looked a bit short and narrow, revealing a large part of his waist and abdomen that looked like a vest. Behind the wolfskin gloves was an iron plate wrist guard, but there was only one. Such an incongruous outfit can often be seen on the Kingdom Avenue. It was just a group of wandering knights. He rode a tall warhorse. Although the clothes didn't look very good, anyone who knew horses could tell at a glance that this stallion had no trace of plowing in the fields. The man who came was Cole, who rode his horse all the way along the King's Road. He was still wearing the chef's robe, but he put on simple leather armor and equipped it with 2 swords to make him look more like a knight. These equipment were sent by 2 thieves, and of course Cole was very kind to send him to see the gods. Ahead was the next swamp, and the humidity suddenly became much heavier. Here you could already feel a little bit of summer. Crossing the next swamp would mean leaving the north. Now that it was dark, he should find a place to rest for the night. Perhaps the land near the swamp was more fertile, and there were farmlands everywhere, so it was easy to find the village. Cole lightly lifted the reins and controlled the horse to walk slowly. The villagers seemed to be used to the wandering knight. Cole got off the horse and knocked on a door at random. The owner looked unfriendly. He shouted loudly, "We don't welcome guests here, go away quickly." Then he walked to the next house. Although the owner's attitude was a little kinder, he still refused to let him stay. Cole had already gotten used to it after traveling for a few days. The third person to open the door was a farm girl. She first looked at Cole and said, "What can I do for you, sir? I wonder if I can stay here for one night. I can pay for it." At this time, a man's voice in the house called out, "Laurie, who's outside?" The girl answered, "It's a knight." A thin man came out from the shadows. He had a flat chin and sharp eyes. He was wearing a grey linen shirt and no shoes. His clothes were barely made of a hemp rope as a belt. When he walked, his entire legs were outside his clothes, covered with thick black hair, and even some parts were missing. "Oh, I wonder what this knight can do for you?" He had to look up to see Cole's face. "He hopes to stay at our house." The girl named Laurie answered for him. He said he can pay. "Pay? We can let you stay, but it will cost 10 copper coins a night." The man asked for the price. Cole nodded and took out 10 copper coins from his horse. "This is my room fee, please." The man saw that he took out the money without frowning and thought to himself, this man is quite generous. His attitude became enthusiastic, and then he asked the girl to prepare a place for Cole. Although it was just a sheepskin on a pile of straw, it was better to rest under the eaves for a night than to be in the wild. Cole tied the horse outside the door. Just then, the girl came out with a baby. Cole asked her, "Madam, I wonder where I can find some good fodder here." Hearing Cole calling her, Lorrie paused and seemed a little scared. At this time, the man came out again. "My lord, if you are willing to pay an extra 3 copper coins, then I will take good care of your horse for you." Cole thought about it and gave him the copper coins. Theon tied a bag of silver deer coins on the horse. He didn't spend much along the way. 3 copper coins could save him a lot of trouble. "Take good care of my horse, or I'll teach you that my sword is not vegetarian," Cole threatened. Although he was willing to pay, he was not a sucker. He didn't want this man to feed his horse with random things. The man nodded and bowed. "Don't worry, sir. I'll ask the bitch at home to find the best horse feed for your horse. Her father used to raise horses for noble masters. What are you still looking at? If the knight's horse is starved, I will beat you to death." The man kicked the girl. She staggered a few steps with her eyes closed, and the baby in her arms burst into tears. "I have to take care of the child, Lance. This damn bastard should be fed to the wolves. It won't die if you keep him at home," he cursed. Cole frowned. He didn't like guys who beat women, but he didn't dare to speak up when he thought it was someone else's family affair. The girl lowered her head silently and took the child back to the room. "Don't worry, sir. Your horse will still be full of energy, even if it ravages all the mares in the 7 kingdoms tomorrow," he said flatteringly. The girl put the child among a pile of rags and then gently comforted him. Don't cry, Mom will be back soon." She turned around and saw Cole coming in. She couldn't help trembling, then hurriedly took a broken sickle and hurried out the door. Cole touched his nose. "Is he so scary?" There were only Cole and the babbling baby in the house. The man disappeared after sending Lorrie to cut hay. Cole sat on the straw pile to rest and took out a book to read. It was lent to him by Tyrion, but the little devil walked so fast and seemed to have forgotten that the book was still with him. Legend of the King's Good Duncan. This kind of biography is indeed a good choice to kill time. He gradually became fascinated, and suddenly a cry pulled him back from the world of knights. The child was crying, and he stood up instinctively. The baby in the pile of cloth waved his skinny little hands. His face was red, and his little feet were kicking. He looked inside and outside the room, but there was no one in sight. After thinking for a while, he picked up the child, lightly, as if he was holding a piece of cloth. The child seemed to be more stable in his arms, but he was still crying. "Is he hungry? Where can I find food for him?" Cole held the child and coaxed him. To be honest, he would rather fight with people than coax a baby. With a bang, the door was pushed open. It was the child's mother, Lorrie, who came back. She looked at Cole, suddenly rushed up, and took the baby back in front of Cole's astonished eyes. Then she shrank back vigilantly, and looked at Cole angrily. "I just want to coax him. He must be hungry." Cole felt like he was dealing with a mountain lion at this time. The girl was stunned for a moment, and then she turned back into the soft and sticky woman. She lowered her head in fear and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sir Knight." Cole smiled. "You are a good mother, and the gods will bless you and your son." "Thank you, sir." Cole walked back to his seat and continued to read his book. He took out some dried meat as a snack. Maybe because of his great strength, he would often feel hungry. After feeding the child, Lorrie went out to feed the horse. When she came back, she saw the knight eating and couldn't help swallowing her saliva. The man came back very late, and Cole lay in the haystack in a half-asleep state. "Lorrie, damn it. You stinky bitch. Open the door for your man." The wooden door was knocked loudly. Cole got up and walked forward. The mother and son had fallen asleep. He opened the door and smelled alcohol. Lance rushed in and bumped into Cole directly. It felt like he had hit a steel plate. He looked up confusedly, shook his head, and seemed to remember something. "So it's the night. Ha ha ha. You really should go. Have a drink with me. I can buy you a glass of beer." Cole made way for him, and at this time Lorrie was also awakened. She stood up and greeted him, only to see the man drag her to him, and then said to Cole with a mouthful of alcohol, "Knight, as long as 10 coppers, I will let her serve you for a night." "Lance, what are you talking about?" The girl tried to break free in fear. With a snap, the man's palm slapped the girl's face, and even under the faint light of the moonlight, the bright red handprint could be seen. "Stinky cousin, I don't know who gave birth to your bastard. Go and serve the knight well. I'm waiting for the wine money." He was about to slap again, but Cole held his arm tightly, and he felt like he was firmly clamped by an iron clamp. "Stop it, I don't need anyone to serve me." Cole's words were full of coldness, and those who knew him should know that he was full of anger. "My lord, such a woman is not easy to find. Are you sure you don't want to give it a try? It only costs 10 copper coins." He was like selling a product. Cole looked at the girl's frightened eyes. He finally understood why she was so scared when she saw him. Looking at a girl who was only slightly older than him, she should have lived under the bright sunshine at this age. In an instant, a sentence from the biography of the knight flashed through his mind. "This man protects the weak, just as every true knight should do." This sentence was the dawn of hope for the legendary Kingsguard Sir Duncan the Tall at his most desperate moment. At that time, he was not a famous knight in the Seven Kingdoms, but a young boy who beat the royal family for justice. He was forced to conduct the trial of the Seven Sons because he rescued a female puppeteer who was molested by the royal children. This was the same as the trial by combat that Cole mentioned in Winterfell, a way of deciding the trial by combat. His enemy was the Kingsguard, who was famous in the kingdom and swore to protect the royal family, and he couldn't even get 6 people to help him. At this moment of despair, Prince Bela came riding a black horse. He stepped on the morning mist, wearing a roaring dragon helmet, and said such ordinary words. This battle took Prince Bela's life. He stood on the side of the weak and the side of justice just like a knight. You have to know that his identity is the first heir to the kingdom, the prince of the Targaryen family. At this moment, Cole's eyes flashed with murderous intent. Although he could not reach the level of Prince Bela, as the word said, his sword should protect the weak. Facing such scum, he really couldn't find any excuse for him. Suddenly, his hand that drew the sword was pulled by someone. It was the girl. Tears flashed in her eyes. "My lord, I'm willing to serve you. Please don't kill my husband." Cole's soul paused for a moment, and his eyes were full of confusion. After a sigh, he suddenly threw the man to one side, then walked into the house to pick up his bag, untied the reins, and looked at the house in confusion, and then rode away. The whistling wind stirred up waves in his heart. It turned out that the justice he thought of was just a fantasy justice. He was like a noble son, with an innocent heart, yearning for the so-called stories of knights, but the reality was extremely cold. If he killed the man, what would happen to the girl? He left after the matter was done, thinking that he had done a just thing. In the cold winter, without a man to support the house, how could the girl and her child survive? The gentle world in his previous life took too good care of him, and the stories taught to him by Mr. Riemann made him have too much hope for this world. Sure enough, only after leaving the nest can the eagle understand the meaning of the storm. Winterfell made him realize his status, and the farm girl made him recognize the world. P.S. The contract has been signed. Thank you very much for appreciating my humble work. Chapter 20 Meet again. The dusk was heavy, and as the bright red sunset went down, the sky and the earth seemed to be drawn with a blue curtain. The night in the Neckmarsh seemed to be surrounded by ghosts. There were desolate graves all over the north, and the lonely ghosts in the fog seemed to blink all the time. Cole had some more mud on his body. Riding a horse in the swamp was not a good choice, especially at night. He led the horse carefully and had to use the eye of time from time to find the way. If he left the road, he had to be careful of quicksand and swamps. This is an absolute place of death. Venomous snakes, poisonous flowers and lizard lions, each of which could take your life. The Neckmarsh is a natural great wall in the north. As long as this pass is blocked, it can be said that one man can block the pass and 10,000 men cannot open it. The damp miasma is very heavy at night. It is heard that there are marsh people living here, and they are nicknamed Mudmen by the Seven Kingdoms. But Cole has been in the Neckmarsh for 2 days, let alone houses, not even a ghost. He dared not stop easily, fearing that the mud pit in the shallows would suddenly rise, or that the lizard lion lurking in the swamp would attack him. Cole's mud was caused by the floating wood-like monster. After leaving the farmhouse, Cole rode wildly all the way, plunged into the twilight-filled neck swamp, and did not run much all night until the morning mist dispersed the beams of the Tyndall effect, and he stopped his horse to rest. At that time, he was about to step on a piece of rotten wood to scoop some water, to wash his face and refresh himself, but he met Liu, TND. The lizard lion opened its mouth, and pounced on him. This dog thing did not follow martial ethics, so Cole showed mercy, and sent it to see the gods. The meat was very dry, and was not recommended for consumption. Now when Cole saw the floating wood, he felt that it was a lizard lion. No wonder many people are unwilling to leave their homes in their lives. This world is wild and remote and dangerous. Occasionally, when he was tired, he would stop to rest for a while, but Cole would never dare to fall asleep. He had not slept well for a long time. Suddenly, there was a fire, like a dark star emitting a dim light in the moonless night sky. It was a fire. There was someone. Cole instantly swept away his tiredness and thought to himself, someone is there. Should I go over there? Most of the people who slept in the wilderness at night should be like Cole, either hired knights, wandering warriors, or merchants. Don't underestimate people's greed. Even Theon Greyjoy coveted his sword, let alone these people. Maybe the silver deer in the bag was enough to make them greedy. Winter Knight is just a sharp-looking steel sword with an ordinary hilt and decoration. I really don't know why Theon would take action for it. Can't Winterfell find a better-looking sword than this? He forgot that there is actually a Valyrian steel sword ice in the wolf family. Morris, didn't you hear clearly? Help your master suck out the poison. The voice was not small, and he was not afraid of attracting the surrounding lizard lions. Why does this voice sound familiar? Exclamation mark. Cole led the horse up, and it was fate that was beyond words. Tyrion was lying on a wooden stake, half unzipping his pants, to reveal a patch of white. He wanted to go south, to catch up with them, but he thought that he had been delayed in Winterfell for a while, and Tyrion might have already crossed the neck, and returned to the south with his servants. He might even be captured by Wolf's mistress Catelyn Stark, and taken to the Eyrie. Hearing the noise, Yoren and the guard Jack stood up suddenly and looked over. They saw a black shadow stepping out of the mist, and Cole's face appeared in their pupils again. Little Cole? How could it be you? Yoren asked in disbelief. The little devil Tyrion also turned his head and couldn't help but feel a little overjoyed when he saw Cole, but soon frowned again. Oh, Morris, can you be a little gentler? Cole gave a smile, but his eyes were a little complicated. Long time no see, everyone. He led the horse to the fire and tied the horse under a short tree. What happened? Cole looked at the lying Tyrion. He seemed to feel a little ashamed, but his mouth was not less majestic. Damn it, you told me to be careful of the she-wolf, but I almost died in the mouth of a she-snake. Your prediction is not accurate at all, Cole. Cole's mouth twitched slightly. He thought he was unlucky enough, but who knew that Tyrion's face was even darker. Lord Cole, in fact, it was just a non-venomous water snake. Morris explained on the side. You know shit. Tyrion was very angry. It was a poisonous snake. I saw it bite people to death when I was a child. Morris shut up obediently and then continued to help Tyrion suck the poison, but the position was a bit awkward, just under the thigh. I almost became a eunuch. Cole chuckled twice. Did the Starks kick you out? Tyrion said jokingly, I told you that those guys only welcome the Night's Watch. Seeing Cole's strange expression, Tyrion's eyes widened instantly. Were you really kicked out? Almost. Hahaha, I'm really curious about how you got those Starks who care about shitty honor to kick you out. Tyrion thought for a moment and asked again. I remember they asked you to be a cook, right? Did you pee in their wine? You should really be eaten by Jon's direwolf. Cole looked like he wanted to hit someone. A bastard dare not touch the Queen's brother. Oh, Morris, can't you be gentler? When we return to Casterly Rock, I will have you thrown into the women's branch to learn what gentleness is from those women. The Squire Morris looked very aggrieved. He was already gentle enough, but how could he suck the venom without force? Besides, it was just a non-venomous water snake. I'll take you to the Westerlands, where no one will dare to touch you, as long as you say Lannister. Tyrion vowed. Cole thought for a moment, maybe it would be a good choice to join the Lannisters, although Tyrion was not favored by his father, Lord Tywin. My hire is not low, Lannister. Cole said jokingly. I can pay double. Tyrion raised 2 fingers. Cole stretched out his hand. Then it's a pleasure to cooperate. I promise I won't be your squire. Oh, Cole. You are really like those greedy hedge knights. Who says it's not? Cole took out the biography of the tall Sir Duncan from his arms and read a line. Hedge knights are the purest knights. Other knights may be loyal to their lords or plan for their territories, but we speak from our hearts and stick to our beliefs. Tyrion took the book. I was wondering where this book went. It turns out it's with you. The Night's Watch is actually the purest knight, Cole. Euron said on the side. A group of thieves and rapists who violate knights. Tyrion continued his words. Chapter 21. Fateful Encounter. Tyrion was lying on his horse, and his servant was leading the horse. He turned his head and said to Cole, who was riding on the side, the so-called neck swamp is actually just like this. You haven't been inside to see it. Quicksand and swamp mud won't let you feel so safe. Cole had a rare good sleep last night and was in a much better mood. Humans can even build something like the wall. It's not impossible to fill a few roads in the swamp. He continued, the north occupies half of the kingdom's land, but the population is not even as much as King's Landing. Of course, I think the records in the book are definitely wrong. The population of the north must be more than King's Landing. No one has recorded this kind of thing one by one, so how can there be an accurate number? But if the road in the next swamp is widened, allowing more merchants to travel between the north and the south, maybe the land here can be used. Tyrion said what he thought in his heart. He always thinks a lot and often thinks deeply about some issues. Even Cole admires this. After taking a sip of wine, he turned back into that bastard little devil. There is always a lot of topics to talk about when traveling with him. When the muddy path began to have scattered gravels, a coast appeared in sight. Tyrion pointed to the cliff and said, welcome to the south, Cole. That is the Bay of Bight. The 3 islands above are the territory of the Eyrie Valley. We will soon find an inn to rest here. This is already the Luan City area. There is no shortage of inns along the Kingdom Avenue along the Trident River. Tyrion, we should rush to Casterly Rock as soon as possible, instead of staying on the road for too long. Tyrion pointed to his buttocks. Unless there is a dragon carrying me, I can't ride a horse now. You are still worried about that dream. I also dreamed of dragons, but I don't know how long they have been extinct. Dreams are always deceiving, just like the old nanny's white ghost stories. Come on Cole, I will take you to experience the enthusiasm of southern girls. No, Tyrion, please believe me, staying in an inn is definitely the decision you regret the most. Cole said very seriously. Tyrion patted his head in sorrow. Really, you actually believed what you saw in your dream? I can guarantee that your dream must be a lie. Although he complained, the few of them did not stay in a tavern in the end, but spent a few nights in the wilderness. It was drizzling that day, and the sky was getting dark. A bright fire was shining in an inn in front of them. Tyrion could no longer hold back. Cole, please let Paul Lannister go. I really want to take a hot bath and lie comfortably on the bed, instead of being in the rain like a wandering beggar in the corridor. 4 pairs of eyes looked at Cole, which made it difficult for him to say what he insisted on. This little rain is actually not that good, he added lightly, compared to the north. Well, it seems that Tyrion is determined to stay in a hotel. Pray to the gods that it is not this day. He does not have a photographic memory, but only vaguely remembers that Tyrion will suffer when he goes south, but he can't remember the details, let alone the specific time point. The time in the book is simply chaotic except for the order of sequence. Jack, go open the door. Tyrion ordered the servant. Jack pushed the door open and shouted at the same time. The boss was a fat woman with white hair. When she grinned with bright red teeth, memories instantly flooded into Cole's mind. He secretly said, oh no, and then swept his eyes into the house. Tyrion was taking out a gold dragon. I just need a place with a warm fire to spend the night. The boss was in a dilemma and kept apologizing. Because of the Prime Minister's tournament, the room was full recently. She couldn't drive away guests for gold coins. Cole soon found the figure among a group of wandering warriors and knights. Her coarse linen clothes could not hide her difference. Of course, there was also the white-haired knight beside her. She was lowering her head and listening to the minstrel talking across the table. This woman must be Lady Catelyn Tully, the wife of Eddard Stark, the Duke of the North, and the mother of Robb Stark, the young wolf. She was quite beautiful, with flaming red hair. She was not as old as Cole had imagined. She was probably less than 30 years old, which was the age when a woman's charm was at its peak. The singer jumped up and shouted, "Lord Lannister," when he saw Tyrion. He began to recommend his own songs, but Tyrion's attention had long been attracted by the people at the table. He smiled and said, "Lady Stark, what a surprise. I'm sorry I didn't see you in Winterfell." The singer was dumbfounded. He didn't know that the woman sitting in front of him had such a noble status. He just came here to show off, because she was beautiful. Of course, it would be better if they were willing to order one of his songs, or if he could have something with this beautiful lady. He opened his mouth wide and his face changed rapidly. He could only curse himself for his poor eyesight. Tyrion was just greeting him with good intentions, but what happened next completely dumbfounded him. Cole sighed in his heart and then prepared to draw his sword. There were dozens of knights here. This man came to my house as a guest, intending to murder my 7-year-old son. When Catelyn pointed at Tyrion and shouted, sure enough, they became the target of public criticism in an instant. The knights here were either vassals of the Tully family or vassals of their vassals. Catelyn was the former eldest princess of the Tully family. She called out to the knights. Before she asked for the arrest of Tyrion, she also deliberately read out the power of these knights, which made some knights have no reason to watch the show. There was a clang of swords being drawn, and Tyrion was shocked, and his mouth opened wide. He looked back and saw Cole shaking his head helplessly. "Lady Stark, I think you must have made a mistake." Tyrion tried to explain. Who knew that Catelyn would question him in a row, and even produced evidence. It was a Velaryon steel dagger, which was the murderer's weapon. Prostitutes, drunkards, and drunkards all shouted loudly, wanting the knights to kill this little devil. Only the boss was begging bitterly, saying that if the Lannisters died in her hotel, she would also suffer. Cole glanced at Euron, thinking that if he had watched with him, he might have escaped. But he drew his sword with a clang. Tyrion tried to stop him, but the two of them were separated for a long distance. "Gentlemen, you are loyal to your own lords, and to the king. This man is the queen's brother, and his father is Lord Tywin Lannister of Casterly Rock. I don't think you are qualified to convict him. If you think he is guilty, let's go to King's Landing together, and let King Robert judge for us. How about that?" Cole said. Catelyn glared at him. "My lords, this man is in league with demons, and has no honor to speak of. Please, for the sake of honor and oath, bring them to justice, and help me send him to Winterfell, to be judged by the king's law." "Cole, put down your sword, we are no match for them," Tyrion begged. He turned around and continued to explain, but to no avail. If he didn't care about the refinement, he felt that he could rush out at such a speed. Cole looked down at Tyrion and could only sigh helplessly and put down the sword. He thought to himself, this is fate, Lannister. I hope we can get away with it this time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Mountain Clan Tribe. 3 people died. They had been attacking day and night and lost 3 horses on the road. They wanted to stop and rest for a while. They exchanged the death of 3 people for 14 mountain natives. These mountain clansmen were skinny and their weapons and equipment were sticks, hammers, and even sickles. Catelyn looked around the battlefield in a trance, looking at the face as young as Robb. His clothes were stained with blood, as if they were engraved with bright red flowers. This child, whom he called Lannister Running Dog, was wielding 2 huge swords, like a storm. He killed 5 mountain tribesmen alone. He was walking around the battlefield picking something up. He picked up a helmet and tried it on his head. It seemed a little big, so he threw it to the dwarf. He took out another set of armor and put it on himself, picked up a bow and a few arrows. Lady Stark, I ask you to hurry on your way immediately. The enemy will come again. A knight suggested. Catelyn looked at the bodies. She was a warrior of honor. She should give them a decent grave instead of leaving them in the wilderness for crows and wild beasts to eat. As soon as she said this, she heard the mercenary named Bronn say, "You can move them however you want, but Chigeon and I won't do it." The old knight Roderick was also persuading them. He was seriously injured and looked a little weak. Cole and his team were burying Jack. This unlucky child rushed the most fiercely and ended up being the first to be exposed. They could only continue on their way. Catelyn walked in the center of the team. Tyrion rode up to her and said something to her. Cole took back his weapon, and Tyrion also had a dagger and an axe at this time. At this moment, they did not look like prisoners. Along the way, Cole found that this Lady Stark was always looking at him. That night, Cole and a knight were on guard. At this time, Lady Stark, who was thought to have fallen asleep, suddenly got up and walked to his side. In the night, Tyrion opened his eyes slightly, but still maintained his original sleeping posture. No one could really sleep at this moment. Cole glanced at her and continued to wipe the blade of his sword. "You look the same age as my Rob. He is my eldest son." Catelyn looked at his face and said, her tone like a kind elder, "I have seen him in Winterfell, Lady Stark." Catelyn thought of her own child, and tenderness flashed in her eyes. Cole had also seen such a look in the eyes of the farm girl named Laurie. Bran is the most active of all the children. I still can't forget the way he lay in bed, so helpless and thin. He was only 7 years old. He could have ridden a horse and danced with a sword like you. Catelyn's face was covered with sadness. "He has woken up, my lady." Jon was happy about this for a long time at the wall. When mentioning Jon, Catelyn frowned. She didn't want to recall the illegitimate child. "Are you a Night's Watcher?" Cole shook his head. "No, the Night's Watch will not interfere in the affairs of the Seven Kingdoms." "Then are you a knight, child?" Cole was stunned. He should not be considered a knight, but no knight had ever pointed a sword at his shoulder and told him the oath of a knight. "Not really," Cole answered after thinking for a while. "My husband is a Duke of the North, the King's Prime Minister, and a good friend of the King. He has always appreciated young and promising young people. If you are willing, I can ask him to knight you." Cole realized that this Lady Stark was trying to win him over. "My lady, although I'm not a knight, I also know what integrity is. I'm hired by Lannister and will not turn against him in battle. Jon is my friend, and you are his mistress. I don't want to fight you, but please don't embarrass me. In fact, I feel that there must be some misunderstanding between you and Tyrion, my lady." Cole got up suddenly and shouted, "Enemy attack." He pushed Catelyn away and drew his sword to meet the wooden axe that was chopping at her. The Winter Knight directly cut the axe blade in half, and half of the wood fell on Catelyn. Cole raised his arm and slashed, and the man howled and fell to the ground. "Lady Stark, protect yourself." After saying this, Cole raised his sword and killed into the crowd. A man rode his horse and met Cole's head with a hammer in his hand. He raised the hammer, but felt a sense of missing, as if he had hit someone, but he was not sure. Suddenly, there was a sharp pull, as if he was sucked into a vortex. He fell off the horse, and then he realized that it was the plainsman with the sword who pulled him down. He felt a chill in his throat, and blood gushed out instantly. In the last few moments, he felt that the world was spinning. After Cole shook him off, he grabbed his horse, and after steadying the frightened horse, he rode away and killed. 2 mountain cavalrymen in front of him surrounded him, stabbing with wooden spears in their hands like lances. Cole could control himself, but he could not control the horse flexibly. A spear pierced the horse's neck, and with a scream, the skinny horse fell down, and Cole also fell down. His horsemanship was really not good. Another cavalry cooperated and stabbed at him. He turned over to avoid it, twisted his body and climbed up, just in time to meet the head of the charging horse. Without the sword in his hand, Cole opened his arms and pressed against the horse's head. He heard a long cry, and the man and the horse fell. Cole bent back a few meters. His boots were worn by stones, and his arms were bent into an abnormal arc. He stretched out his arms with a muffled sound, and heard the bones snap. His face was twisted, and it was really painful. He crossed his arms and pulled them, and there was another snap. This time the pain was finally relieved a lot. He walked quickly to the mountain man, who was pressed under the horse. His eyes were full of fear, and he was begging for mercy. Cole picked up his sword and killed him. Another mountain man on horseback was swaying on his horse, and he was afraid. Cole took a step forward, and he reined in his horse, and took 2 steps back. Cole suddenly rushed forward, and he hurriedly rode away. The battle was coming to an end. The cavalry ran away. Cole killed 2 more mountain men. When they could relax, the camp became a mess again. There were corpses all over the ground, and wailing. Cole walked past a mountain man lying on the ground, and stabbed him with a sword. There were fewer people standing. Cole noticed that blood was flowing from the shoulder blade of Tyrion's little brother Morris. "Bronn, save me." The mercenary named Chijan was also seriously injured, and was asking for help from his companions. Bronn stabbed him with a sword, and Tyrion and Cole's pupils shrank. As if he noticed someone was looking at him, the mercenary shrugged and said, "He's not going to survive anyway, I'm helping him." Morris looked at his master Tyrion with some fear. He was also seriously injured. Tyrion said, "I won't abandon you, on the honor of the Lannister family. P.S. Thank you for the monthly votes of I'm just a Piton Star Wind Bloodsaint. Thank you for your recommendation votes, and of course thank you for the appreciation of all readers." Chapter 23, Vale of Arryn. Catelyn was riding a horse. Just now, a Lannister squire had died of a high fever due to festering wounds. They did not dare to stay, but the child named Cole went to bury him. He had made the greatest contribution along the way, and he had killed half of the enemies, so no one would speak out to stop them this time. Catelyn had never believed the stories in the biographies of knights before, but after meeting the child, she believed it. Now the only ones alive were the old coach of Winterfell, Knight Rodrik Castle, Sir Willie Ward, and the minstrel Merillion. These people clearly stood on her side, and as for the mercenary Bronn, he had obviously turned to the devil. The child buried the squire named Morris, and his face was extremely gloomy, like a silent volcano. He has killed too many people, and he can't bear it anymore. The old warrior Sir Rodrik said to Catelyn. Catelyn frowned. How could this happen? She began to regret that she shouldn't have brought Lannister to the Vale of Arryn so rashly. 6 people had already died because of this. She was not heartless. She just wanted to seek justice for her son. "There seems to be something wrong with your little brother," Bronn reminded Tyrion in a low voice. He knew that Cole's face was terribly gloomy all the way, and he didn't respond to anyone. "I'm not blind. I can see it naturally. What's going on?" Bronn was a skilled and courageous person, but he had to admit that this child was extremely fierce, just like the warrior of the 7 gods. This kind of situation often happens on the battlefield. You'd better pray to the gods that he won't explode in the next battle, otherwise it is very likely that we will all suffer, he said lightly, as if he didn't care. "You mean, he is suppressing it?" Bronn nodded. "Then what should we do?" Tyrion asked. Bronn thought for a moment, then cracked a grey smile. "Give him a woman. Now is not the time to joke, mercenary." Tyrion's face was a little dark. "This is not a joke, Lannister. Otherwise, why do you think those guys who have finished fighting go to prostitutes?" The two looked at the only woman at the scene. "Let's go." Cole jumped on the horse. "Man, you should learn to relax." The mercenary squeezed out a self-righteous smile. "Yeah." This seemed to have no effect. Not long after they started, the vibration of horse hooves came. Cole seemed to be stimulated by the sound. At this time, a hand patted his shoulder. "Calm down, kid. It's just killing a few people. Knights are born to fight. Be prepared and fight hard." Cole looked up and saw that it was the old Knight Rodrik. He looked tired and pale. He always protected Lady Stark. He turned around and saw Catelyn smiling at him. What's wrong with him? He asked himself in his heart. Killing made him feel disgusted, but they were all enemies. If he didn't kill them, he would die. He was just protecting himself. But the wailing and begging for mercy were like nightmares that lingered in his ears all the time. He felt that it was very common for him to kill someone for the first time, as if he had already seen life and death on the Great Wall. But as more and more people died under his sword, and the frequency increased, he felt something was wrong. "Who are you?" A team of armored cavalrymen raised a blue flag with a white crescent falcon. "It seems we are saved. They are cavalrymen from the Arryn family," Tyrion said. I'm Catelyn Stark from Winterfell. Catelyn quickly stated her identity. The leading knight was stunned. He thought it was a team of mountain people. When he looked closely, he saw a beautiful Landel face, which was somewhat similar to Lady Lysa Tully, the matron of the Arin Valley. The mountain clans are all descendants of the ancestors, and there are few such beautiful women. Moreover, she herself said she was a Stark. How could people from the north come here? If Tyrion knew what he was thinking, he would definitely correct him. Northerners are also descendants of the first men. Madam, why are you here? The knight asked in confusion. I want to see your duke's wife, Lysa Tully. I'm her sister. After hearing this, the knight bowed and apologized. Madam, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were coming in advance. No, it's not your fault, sir. I just had an urgent matter to see my sister. I'm sorry. May I ask the honorific title of your family? I'm Donal Waynwood from the Waynwood family. Please allow me to escort you to the end of your journey. Madam, I know Countess Anaya Waynwood. I wonder if she is doing well recently. My mother is fine. Catelyn showed a polite smile, solemn but friendly, like a spring breeze, but giving people a sense of untouchability. Donal is a bloody gate knight loyal to the Arryn family. He speaks very gracefully and uses words very appropriately. Tyrion whispered to Cole, this family has always been known for its etiquette. They were protected by the cavalry in the center and walked slowly towards the mountain pass. The old knight could hardly ride a horse. They walked towards the fortress. Cole reached out to help Roderick. He stopped holding up and whispered a thank you. Lady Catelyn seemed to be very worried about his situation and hurriedly asked the bloody gate knight Donal if there were any maesters in the fortress. Donal shook his head and told her that all the maesters had been summoned to the Eyrie by her sister Lysa. The fortress was built at a gorge, and the watchtowers climbed the rock walls on both sides. Cole was shocked by the airtight fortifications in front of him. No wonder it took a dragon to conquer the Vale of Arryn. With this fortress, that could not be opened by one man. I really don't know how to attack it. Of course, the Vale of Arryn did not join the Targaryen family by means of war, but in a peaceful way. But the dragon played a big role in it. But after entering the fortress, Cole realized that he had underestimated the group of cuckolds in the Arryn Valley. He could only sigh that he was still too young. They were greeted by another bloody gate knight, who was also Catelyn's uncle, Brynden Tully, known as the Blackfish. He was a knight admired even by the Kingslayer. His nickname was also very interesting. It was said that his brother Hoster Tully called him the black sheep of the Tully family because of some things, and he himself retorted that he was a blackfish. The blackfish badge made of gold and obsidian on his shoulder was his characteristic, which was just the opposite color of the silver sturgeon badge of the Tully family. After passing through the Bloody Gate fortress, they entered the Arryn Valley, and the view suddenly became clear. There were farmhouses, fields and blue sky, as well as towering mountains. In the morning light, everything exuded a scorching brilliance, like a secluded paradise. It was quiet and beautiful here, protected by mountains, surrounded by mountains and rivers, and the highest mountain range soared into the sky with a spear, which was the mountain called Giant's Spear. The Eyrie is located on the Giant's Spear. Between the layers of the mountains, the Arryns have built fortresses and checkpoints. Cole thought to himself, they are indeed a bunch of bastards. It's right there, on the side of Alessa's Tears. Sir Blackfish pointed to the castle, and said to Catelyn, Alessa's Tears is a river flowing down from the peak of the Giant's Spear. Cole remembers that there seems to be some story, but he can't remember it anymore. P.S. The original work is written in great detail here. I can only briefly describe it from Cole's perspective, otherwise it would be too watery. The original work is wonderful, but please treat this as a parallel world. After all, the original work is not finished, so I will apply some settings from film and television. Chapter 24, Eagle's Nest. Arriving at the gates of the moon under the Giant's Lance, we looked up at the steep cliffs. The winding path, along the sky above the cliffs, and the stairs are simply a nightmare for those with acrophobia. If you raise your head, you can see Stone Castle. If you look up again, you will find another fortress called Snow Mountain Castle. Looking down again, there is Long Sky Castle. The last White Rock Tower is the Eyrie. Night has fallen, and the little devil immediately said that he would never go up in the dark even if he died. Cole also had this idea. Walking on this dangerous and unfamiliar road in the dark, you will have to learn to fly if you are not careful. We will stay here tonight. The words of Sir Blackfish are like a stabilizing force to stabilize the uneasy people. The one stationed at the gates of the moon is Sir Nestor of the Royce family. He is also the chief steward of the Vale of Arryn. Cole remembers that the unlucky guy Sir Waymar Royce who was killed by the White Walkers at the beginning of the play is from this family. Lady Catelyn's sister seemed eager to summon her, asking her to go to the Eyrie overnight. Tyrion and Cole were imprisoned in a room, and their belongings were confiscated again. The two sat on the ground with only straw, and stared at each other. Tyrion finally asked the words that had been swallowed in his heart. Did you dream about it? I always thought that the legend of the Dream Walker was just as deceiving as the White Walkers. I really should have listened to you. He was very regretful. He could have avoided such a disaster, but because of his greed for pleasure, two loyal servants died and implicated his few friends. In fact, you can stay out of it like Yoren. She just wants to catch me. Tyrion said, your commission has not been paid yet. It's agreed to be double. It's not easy to find such a generous employer. Cole said nonchalantly. And I don't think you're wrong. You made a saddle for the kid. Tyrion was touched. He always thought he was a hard-hearted person, just like the White Walkers. He would never love anyone, and no one would care about him, just like his nickname Little Devil. No need to worry about those mountain people anymore. I can finally sleep well. Cole lay on the haystack. He was under terrible pressure these days. Watching the people around him fall one after another, Cole never felt that death was so close to him. He would never have thought that the few short lines in the book were so dangerous. Tyrion also lay down, not knowing whether to comfort Cole or comfort himself. Brother will definitely come to save me. Can the Lannister army attack the Eyrie? Cole asked. There is no indestructible castle, but my father will definitely not lead the army here. He dreams of killing me. Tyrion said with disdain. I heard that Lord Tywin Lannister is a very capable man. At least when he was the hand of the king, the kingdom was stable. Tyrion rested his hands on his head and closed his eyes. Yes, and then he killed his own king and let his dogs rape the princess. Well, talking to this kid about his father would be to make him unhappy, so Cole could only change the subject. Have you ever thought about what the outcome would be? Did you dream about something again? Tyrion opened his eyes. Anyway, they will definitely not dare to kill me. Don't be so confident. Now it's a woman and a child who rule the Vale of Arryn. They may not necessarily reason with you. Tyrion instantly thought of his sister who thought she was the queen. Except for her face, she was too stupid to look like a Lannister. If I die, you will certainly not be able to escape. Tyrion opened his hands with a look of resignation. Anyway, you heard it. That Stark woman called you Lannister's running dog. Both of them were exhausted from the journey. Tyrion was at a disadvantage in terms of physique, so he fell asleep unknowingly until he was rudely awakened the next day. Outside the door, Bronn and the singer Merillion. Bronn greeted him jokingly. I wonder if Lord Lannister had a good dream. I dreamed that I would be pulled up by a terrible old man in the morning. Tyrion seemed very dissatisfied with being woken up. Watch your words, dwarf. This is not your Casterly Rock, Sir Blackfish said expressionlessly. The Knights of the Gates of the Moon received orders to escort the little devil up. Blackfish suddenly said to Cole, do you want to come with me, kid? Cole looked at him puzzled, and Blackfish forced a smile. Little cat asked me to take care of the child who came with Tyrion. I think it's you. I don't quite understand, Sir Tully. She said that you have made the greatest contribution along the way. If it weren't for you, she probably wouldn't have come here. She also asked me to tell you, you are still young, kid, don't make a mistake and associate with the devil. I think you must have misunderstood something. Give the child's things back to him. He pointed to a soldier, then turned to Cole and said, if you want to follow, come on. Tyrion's big head was full of question marks, meaning that he was the only prisoner, right? Cole shrugged at him, as if to say, I don't know why this happened. In fact, it was Catelyn's compassion under the glory of maternal love. She couldn't bear to let a child as old as Robb end his life so early. You know, noble criminals have certain immunity, and Cole is obviously not a noble. He himself admitted that he is not a knight. Thinking of the child who had saved her from the mountain people several times, Catelyn felt more and more that she had to do something, which led to the current scene. Call her stupid, she really loves her child, and is even willing to travel thousands of miles to King's Landing, and has the courage to tie up Tyrion. She is tough, compassionate, and knows gratitude. She is also smarter than ordinary noble women, but she is ultimately limited by her vision and growth. Compared with people like Cersei who are motivated to control power, Catelyn is indeed far inferior, and even her husband Eddard Stark is not as good as Queen Cersei. Although Catelyn played a role in pushing back and resisting Lan in the outbreak of the conflict between the lion and the wolf, maybe Cole could call her a fool when reading the book, but she is just a woman who wants to save her husband and children. What else can you expect a woman to do in this era? Plan and win thousands of miles away. As a player in the game of power, Catelyn is not qualified. She just wants to live her life in peace, but she doesn't know that the continent is already turbulent and no one can stay out of it, let alone her prominent family. But as a mother, she is indeed worthy of respect. Orphans like Cole, who have been orphaned for 2 lifetimes, have never known what maternal love is. Cole followed the team and went straight up along the ladder. The road between the 3 fortresses in front can be traveled by donkey, but the road behind is too narrow and can only be walked on foot. When approaching the peak, the strong wind whistled like a knife, like the howling of the devil. Tyrion's legs were even trembling, and he didn't know if he had cramps again. Although the size of the mountain top limits the scale of the Eyrie, and the 7 white towers are closely connected, it is still no problem to accommodate hundreds of people. But when Cole and his team walked into the castle, they found that it was a desolate place, and there was not even a single person in sight. Chapter 25 Arrows. Cole and Bronn were placed together. There were many empty rooms on the Tower of the Eyrie, and few people were seen in the guest rooms. Because of their status, they were placed in the lowest class guest residence. On the other side was the servants' residence, which was much more lively. Looking out from the window, the center surrounded by 7 towers was a courtyard, and on one side of the courtyard was a martial arts training ground, where knights could occasionally be seen training. The Eyrie was like a palace on the sea of clouds, and the walls were also pure white. When you wake up in the morning, you will feel like you are in a world of clouds and mist, and you can ride the wind at any time, or be independent, and fly to heaven. Of course, this kind of comfort is something Tyrion cannot feel. He was tragically imprisoned in an area called Dungeon. The Dungeon of the Eyrie is very interesting. The semi-sloping ground has a hole directly dug between the cliffs. Behind the slope is an endless cliff. The prisoners can fly as long as they roll a few times. Marillion, the highbrow bard, obviously disdained to be with Cole and Bronn, 2 rough men, so the 2 of them wandered around the castle. "Are you a Dornishman?" Bronn looked around comfortably, reaching out to touch the wall from time to time. "Your hair and face have Dornish features, but they are not quite like Dornish." Cole had never thought about his identity, and he didn't care. "Maybe, anyway, I haven't seen my parents. Your martial arts have some aristocratic flavor. I thought you were a servant of Lannister, but I haven't seen a servant talk to the master like you." Bronn saw that there was no fear of the nobles in his eyes, which was very similar to him. "He is my friend." "Friend?" Bronn's tone was a little disdainful. Being friends with dwarves is not a good choice. Who made Lannister rich? Everyone in the 7 kingdoms is willing to be friends with Lannister. Talking about friendship and honor with a person like Bronn is nonsense. It's better to brag about women with him, but Tyrion is obviously better in this field. The Golden Dragon is a good thing. With this little thing, you can choose any woman in the 7 kingdoms. Just passing by the martial arts field, it was empty at this time. "Do you want to go downstairs and try it?" Cole suggested. "I don't want to eat in a sweat." Bronn refused. Cole had to go down the spiral staircase alone. There were only wooden swords and bows hanging on the racks in the arena. He took a short bow and tried to pull the bowstring. He also seized one from the mountain people, but the string woven with plant ropes was completely different from the one in his hand. Bronn continued his exploration. The arena suddenly became terribly quiet, accompanied by the whistling wind. He pulled an arrow from the quiver beside him, then pulled the bow, fully stringed it, and turned the crotches to the target. He shot several arrows in a row, which was much more difficult than using a sword to cut someone. Only one arrow hit the target. Thinking that his eye of time had the function of a telescope, His pupils shrank silently, and the target range instantly appeared in his eyes, as if it was right in front of him. Like focusing, he turned his eyes to control the distance, and shot another arrow directly into the target. Through the eye of time, his accuracy was much higher. At least he no longer missed the target. He was concentrating on practicing archery, not knowing that there was already a person standing on the spiral staircase of the martial arts arena. Continuously pulling the bowstring full made his arm a little sore, and a big red mark was left on the base of his thumb. You can't rely on brute force to draw the bow, and you don't need to pull the string too full. It's more comfortable to draw this kind of arrow with your middle finger. The voice of Lord Blackfish sounded. Brynden Tully walked down the spiral staircase and came to the martial arts arena. He picked up a short bow and said, "Watch this, boy. Your posture looks like a woman drawing needles and thread." He showed Cole the standard bow holding method and shot an arrow, hitting the center of the bullseye. Cole tried to imitate the posture, only to see Lord Blackfish pull his arm with the bow. Lower it. He pulled his waist again. Stand up. Cole pulled in his abdomen to draw the bow, and his thigh was pulled again. Don't move your legs. After being pulled 5 or 6 times in a row, Cole successfully showed the correct way to draw the bow. Yes, much smarter than those idiots in the castle. He picked up an arrow and handed it to Cole. Try it. Put the arrow on the string. The bow was like a crescent moon, and Blackfish reminded on the side. Follow your eyes. Instantly time began to slow down. The red center of the bullseye shrank into a dot in the pupil. The palm of the arm stretched out, and the arrow pierced through the strong wind like a straight line, and hit the target directly. Of course, it did not hit the center of the bullseye. Sir Blackfish nodded. The little finger can reach such a level. It can be seen that he has good talent. How could he know that Cole was cheating with the Eye of Time? Boy, come and play sword with me for a few times. He threw the iron sword over. Cole looked at the wooden swords for training on the shelf and heard Sir Blackfish say, "Wooden swords are for children." Cole could only hold the iron sword and salute him. "Excuse me, sir." Who knew that the old man would attack directly with the sword, which was not a bit of a knight's demeanor. Hasn't anyone told you that these complicated things are useless on the battlefield? Cole thought of Sir Aliza, the coach of the Night's Watch. Although he was annoying, he had to say that what he taught was real. Blackfish was not well known in the Seven Kingdoms because he rarely participated in the tournament and naturally did not value the empty etiquette of the knights. His fame was earned by fighting in the Battle of the Nine Copper King, so he preferred some practical things. Cole waved his sword to block, and the two of them exchanged swords. Blackfish's attack was extremely tricky, showing murderous intent everywhere. If Cole hadn't kept the Eye of Time open, he really couldn't handle it. At this time, some knights also came to the training ground. Seeing that someone was fighting with Blackfish below, they couldn't help but stop and watch. You know, they have seen how powerful Blackfish is. Someone asked, "Who is this person? He can hold out for so long under Lord Blackfish." "I haven't seen him. Judging from his appearance, he might be a new knight. Maybe Blackfish is assessing whether he is qualified to join the Blood Guard." Just as they were talking, the situation of the battle below suddenly changed. Cole got the upper hand. He was strong and flexible. Although Blackfish could find his loopholes every time, he just couldn't hit him. Instead, as long as Blackfish showed a little weakness, Cole would attack in that direction. The knights present couldn't help but stare. This person was actually chasing Blackfish and fighting. It seemed that an incredible guy had come to Eagle's Nest. A sword pointed directly at Blackfish's throat. "Sir Tully, I'll let you win." Blackfish's eyes flashed with loneliness, and he had to admit that this kid was very good. He sighed silently in his heart. This world still belongs to the young after all. If he were a dozen years younger, he would have to play another game. "Sir Tully." Blackfish chuckled. "No one has called me like this for a long time. I almost forgot my last name. Compared with your archery, your sword is quite useful. If it were a few years earlier, you wouldn't have won so easily." He seemed to be very calm about his failure. In the next few days, Cole would practice bows and arrows every morning, and Blackfish also came every day. He didn't seem to be stingy with his guidance. With his help, Cole's bows became more and more standardized. It seems that he is really talented. Through chatting, the two became familiar with each other. Cole hoped to use Blackfish's mouth to tell the Toledos of the Tully family that Tyrion had nothing to do with those crimes, so he said more. After listening to everything, Blackfish showed appreciation. People who risk their lives for their friends are always admired. At least the child in front of them is a person who knows honor and disgrace. When the two were resting, the servants of the castle suddenly came to the training ground and said, "My lord knights, Lady Lysa summoned everyone to the hall. P.S. I really don't know how to name the chapter, so just read it. It's cold. Please wear more clothes." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.